My name's Liam. I'm 28 now, but this whole mess started when I was 23. 5 years. That's how long it took for me to build something from scratch, watch it get ripped away, fall into the hands of someone who had no idea what they were doing, and then get a desperate call asking me to fix the disaster they created. 5 years, and it only took 10 months for her to burn it all to the ground. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. I grew up in what I like to call a performative family. From the outside, we looked like your typical middle-class, well-adjusted household, Christmas photos with matching sweaters, forced smiles at birthday dinners, the whole suburban image. But behind all that, it was just a play. And the lead actress? My younger sister, Emma. Emma could do no wrong. Ever. She once crashed my mom's car into a neighbor's mailbox while texting, and somehow that turned into a story about how I should have reminded her not to take it without asking. I was 16 at the time. She was 13. That's the kind of household I grew up in. My parents, especially my mom, put her on a pedestal so high it would have taken oxygen masks to breathe up there. She got everything: new phone every year, tutors when she didn't feel like studying, vacations with her friends that were well-deserved breaks, even though she'd barely lifted a finger her whole life. Me? I was the responsible one, the mature one, which, in family terms, meant the one who was ignored unless something needed fixing. I never really complained, though. I think part of me believed that if I just worked hard enough, I'd get noticed. I'd get my moment. I wasn't trying to outshine Emma. I just wanted to build something of my own, something real. So I did. Right out of college, I started a small digital marketing agency. At first, it was just me, a used laptop, and a stack of library books on SEO and branding. I worked out of my bedroom. No funding, no handouts, no family support. I was the guy friends called crazy ambitious. I pulled all-nighters, cold emailed potential clients, and juggled freelance gigs on the side just to keep the lights on. My parents didn't get it. "Why don't you get a real job?" my dad asked one night over dinner, while Emma scrolled through Instagram next to him without a care in the world. "I am working. It's just different." He shook his head like I was talking nonsense. "You can't build a life on dreams, Liam." Emma looked up and said, "Yeah, that sounds like something off Pinterest." I remember just staring at my plate and thinking, they really don't believe in me. But I kept going, because I knew what I was doing had potential. And over time, the numbers started proving me right. By the time I turned 25, I had a full team of 6 employees. We had an office space, nothing fancy, but ours. I'd landed 3 major clients that basically carried us through the pandemic, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was building a legacy. I even hired a project manager to take on the day-to-day stuff so I could focus on expansion. And then everything fell apart. It started with a phone call. Mom. She asked if I could come over for dinner. "Just a family thing," she said. No pressure. I should have known. I showed up in a hoodie and jeans, tired from a day of meetings and interviews, only to find everyone seated like it was some formal holiday meal. Emma, Mom, Dad, even my uncle and aunt, who I hadn't seen in months. I walked in and immediately felt the shift in energy. Everyone looked expectant. Polite smiles, too polite. Mom gestured to the seat next to Emma. "Sit, honey. We wanted to talk to you about something important." I sat. Dad cleared his throat and said, "Your mother and I have been talking. We're so proud of what you've built." That should have been the first red flag. They had never said those words before. "And we think," he continued, "that it's time to take the next step to really turn this business into a family legacy." I remember blinking. "What do you mean?" Emma smiled, like she'd just won a prize. And then Mom said, "We want to bring Emma on as a co-owner." I laughed. I genuinely thought it was a joke. "Emma? She doesn't know the first thing about marketing." "She's got great instincts," Mom said quickly. "And she's been taking a few online courses." Emma chimed in, "I've actually been thinking about influencer branding. I have a whole vision." A vision? For my company. I tried to stay calm. "That's not how this works. I built this from the ground up. Emma's not even involved." "But she could be," Dad said firmly. "And you could use the help. You work too much, son. Bringing in family could take some pressure off." I looked around the table. Not a single person was on my side. It was like they'd already made the decision. "So you just expect me to hand over half of everything I built?" "Don't be so dramatic," Mom said. "It's not about halves. It's about trust, unity, family." I stood up. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't crying. But my hands were shaking. "No, absolutely not." Emma rolled her eyes. "Why are you being so selfish? You act like you're the only one with ideas." I've been working for this every day for 5 years, I said slowly. You weren't there when I couldn't afford groceries. You weren't there when I maxed out my credit card to pay my first hire. You weren't there when I had to sleep in the office because I was pulling 72-hour shifts. You don't get to walk in now and take a piece just because you're family. There was a long silence. Then Mom stood up and looked me in the eye. If you won't share it with your sister, maybe it's time to rethink whether this business belongs to the family at all. I froze. What does that mean? It means, Dad said, we've been talking to our lawyer. You filed the business under the family trust umbrella back when you were living with us. Legally, we may have more say than you think. My stomach dropped. They were right. In my first year, when I couldn't afford legal fees, I'd use the family lawyer to help me register the business. He offered to put it under the family trust for tax reasons. I didn't know better. I was desperate. I was young, and they were about to use that against me. I suggest, Dad said calmly, you think about what kind of example you want to set. For your sister. For your future kids. I didn't say another word. I walked out, drove home, and by morning, I'd handed in a resignation letter to my own company. I legally signed over operational control to Emma. They didn't fire me. I walked away. It hurt like nothing else. I spent 2 months feeling like a ghost. I was angry, numb, hollow. I didn't even log into social media. I couldn't bear to see what they were doing to my company. But after the fog lifted, something changed. I remembered who I was before all this. I remembered the drive, the hustle, the fire. So I started again. Not for them. Not for revenge. For me. And now, 2 years later, I have something new. Bigger. Smarter. Leaner. I build it in silence. No social media announcements. No LinkedIn posts. No interviews. Just work. And wouldn't you know it, the business I left behind? It's falling apart. Emma can't handle it. Clients are leaving. The branding is all over the place. I heard they tried launching some influencer campaign that backfired hard. They're bleeding money. Last week, I got a call. Mom. Liam, honey. We need to talk. I let it ring. Then came a text from Dad. Emma's having a tough time. Maybe you could come by. Just for a quick meeting. I didn't respond. But the part that really made me pause? A voicemail from Emma. Okay, look, I get it. Maybe I was a little unprepared. But this was always supposed to be our thing. Please, just come help. You know how to fix this. I didn't call them back. Didn't text. Didn't even send the classic "who dis" message, though I was very tempted. Instead, I poured myself a cup of overpriced coffee from my fancy new espresso machine, a completely unnecessary purchase I made solely because I could, and listened to Emma's voicemail again. Not because I was reconsidering, just because the desperation in her voice was like warm soup for the soul. You ever eat popcorn during a fireworks show? That was me, just vibing while everything they touched went down in flames. Now, let me be clear. I had no intention of getting involved. I knew exactly what would happen. I'd swoop in, fix everything, and they'd give Emma the credit for bringing me back. Nah, not doing that rodeo again. I'd rather eat uncooked rice with a plastic fork than let them drag me into their mess. And besides, I was busy. My new business was booming. I'd built a consulting agency, tailored to helping mid-sized companies rebrand and restructure. We were the ghostwriters of success, behind the scenes, high retainer, zero drama. I had clients I actually liked, a team that respected me. I worked out of a sleek office downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and one of those pretentious snack bars filled with tiny cans of sparkling water that no one actually drinks but somehow make you feel rich. But then, one afternoon, I'm in the middle of reviewing a pitch deck when my phone buzzes. Not a call, a notification from my apartment building's intercom system. Someone was requesting entry. From the lobby, Emma B. You know that moment when your stomach drops, but also you want to laugh because this is so absurd it feels like a sitcom episode? Yeah, that. I didn't buzz her in, obviously. I just stood there, staring at the screen like it owed me money. Not even 10 seconds later, my phone buzzed again. Mom calling. I declined. She called again. Declined. Then a text. We're downstairs. Please let us up. We need to talk. We. As in plural. I peeked through the blinds like some old man in a bathrobe watching for squirrels. And yep, there they were. Emma. Mom. And oh great. Dad too. Standing outside the building like they were shooting the season finale of a family drama no one asked for. You'd think that would be enough to make them go away. But no. Emma had a plan. She pulled out her phone and started calling residents at random through the intercom system. I could hear her voice over the speaker. "Hi, I'm here to see my brother. He must have stepped away. Could you let me in, please?" She was trying to crowdsource a break-in. And unfortunately, some sweet old lady named Mildred in Unit 4B must have believed her, because I heard the buzz, and then the doors opened. They were in the building. Now, I live on the 7th floor, and my elevator takes exactly 47 seconds to arrive on a good day. So I did what any self-respecting, passive-aggressively petty sibling would do. I poured myself another cup of coffee, and I waited. About a minute later, ding, a knock on the door. I opened it halfway, leaned against the frame, and greeted them with the warmest, fakest smile I could muster. "Oh wow, look who figured out how doors work." Mom immediately went into this breathy, fake concerned monologue. "Liam, sweetheart, we really didn't want it to come to this, but Emma's going through such a difficult time," and I held up a finger. "Stop. You had me at we didn't want it to come to this." "Because you did. You absolutely did. You just thought it'd be easier to ambush me than admit you were wrong." Dad tried to step in like he was the level-headed negotiator. "Son, no one's saying you weren't right. But this is bigger than ego. The business is on the verge of collapse. Clients are backing out. The staff is quitting. Your sister is doing her best. She used Comic Sans in a corporate proposal." "Dad," I interrupted. Emma scoffed. "It was a creative choice." I stared at her. "You printed the company logo in pink glitter. It was a rebrand. You used glue and actual glitter. In 2025, she looked ready to argue, but I turned back to my parents. "So let me guess. You thought if you showed up here, you could guilt me into helping. You thought I'd roll over like I always do, fix your mess, and go quietly back into the shadows." Right. They didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch for a beat. Then I stepped aside, not to invite them in, just so they could see what I had now. Behind me, my apartment glowed. Hardwood floors, minimalist furniture, actual art. Not IKEA live laugh love stuff. Real art. The smell of espresso and air conditioning. Peace. Doesn't look like someone who needs rescuing, does it? I said softly. Mom blinked. "Liam, please. Just talk to Emma. Maybe help her for a few weeks. Get things back on track. Then you can walk away again if you want to." I tilted my head. Walk away again? I didn't walk away the first time. You pushed me off a cliff, then handed Emma the keys to my parachute and told her to figure it out. Dad sighed. "Be reasonable." Reasonable would have been not stealing my company in the first place. Then Emma, in classic golden child fashion, threw the tantrum. "I don't know why you're being like this. You always act like you're so much better than everyone. Maybe if you weren't so dramatic, none of this would have happened." I gave her the slow blink of a cat who's about to knock a glass off the table just because it's there. "You're right," I said. "I am better. That's why my business is thriving while yours is giving out free pins at farmers markets to stay relevant." She gasped. Mom looked horrified. "Liam," she snapped, "you're being cruel." "No," I said, stepping back and gently closing the door. "I'm being honest. And for once in my life, I'm not going to apologize for it." Click. I didn't slam it. I didn't yell. I just shut it and locked it. They stood outside for a while. I could hear muffled voices. Emma ranting, Mom trying to calm her down, Dad muttering something about ungrateful, and then finally, footsteps fading down the hallway. But the funny part? That wasn't the end of it. Because they didn't come all this way just to have a dramatic hallway confrontation. They had a backup plan. 2 days later, I came home from the gym to find a plate of cookies on my doorstep. No note. No explanation. Just a neat little plate wrapped in plastic, sitting there like some kind of suburban peace offering. Now, for most people, this might seem sweet. Heartwarming, even. But you have to understand something. My mother only bakes cookies under 2 conditions: to manipulate someone. To manipulate someone harder. She was the kind of mom who made passive-aggressive pies. A double chocolate guilt trip, if you will. So when I saw that plate of homemade forgiveness, I didn't feel warm and fuzzy. I felt like I was being baited into a trap. I picked them up using a towel because, again, glitter glue woman is still out there, and tossed the whole thing into the trash like I was defusing a bomb. Then I checked my phone for missed calls, 3 voicemails, and 1 text that made me audibly laugh. "Emma, hey. So, I talked to this guy who used to be your assistant. Said you always liked cinnamon chip cookies. Hope they're still your favorite. Let's talk." What an absolutely psychotic mix of espionage and baked goods. They'd gone from ignoring me to bribing me with dessert in under 48 hours. That's gotta be a record. I didn't respond. That evening, I decided to decompress by playing some piano. Yes, I play piano. And no, I'm not good enough to make it a personality trait. But after about 10 minutes, I heard a knock on my door. Not a polite one. It was that kind of knock that says, "We know you're in there, and we're not leaving." I sighed, stood up, and opened the door partially, of course. Guess who? Emma. Again. This time wearing sunglasses indoors and holding a clipboard like she was about to audit me. And standing behind her? My mother. Wearing pearls. Pearls. Who wears pearls to a confrontation? Who plans their manipulation outfit? Liam, Mom said, all breathless urgency, I know you're upset, but we just need a few minutes of your time. Just hear us out. Please. Emma held up the clipboard like she was summoning a spell. I brought projections. I just stared at her. Projections? I repeated. She nodded, completely serious. Yes. I've crunched the numbers. The business can recover in under 6 months if we bring you in as a temporary consultant. Oh, now I was a consultant. Last year, I was emotionally unstable and too controlling. Now I'm a one-man resurrection service. I opened the door just a little wider and crossed my arms. Let me guess, I said. You get to stay in charge. I do all the work, and when things look good again, you take the credit and go on another podcast talking about young female entrepreneurship. Emma blinked. That podcast invited me, and I am an entrepreneur. You once ordered interns to rearrange the office plants based on their vibes, I said. That's not leadership. That's a Pinterest board having a seizure. Mom stepped forward, her tone suddenly much firmer. This isn't about personal grudges, Liam. This is about family. Emma is struggling. She needs you. And I think you need us, too. Deep down, I actually had to stop myself from laughing. I'm doing just fine without you, I said calmly. My business is thriving. I don't miss the drama, the emotional acrobatics, or the constant gaslighting. So no, I don't need anything from you. Emma looked ready to explode. Why are you being like this? Like what? Petty. Oh, I said, tilting my head. I'm not being petty. I paused. Yet, that's when it got fun. I took out my phone and opened my photo gallery. I'd been saving something for just this occasion. A screenshot. It was a client testimonial from one of the companies I now worked with. A company they had lost. The testimonial read, "We worked with Emma for 3 months. Zero communication, poorly run campaigns, and branding decisions that actively damaged our image. We're now working with Liam's team, and in just 6 weeks, we've seen an 87% increase in engagement and measurable ROI. Wish we'd started with him." I turned the screen toward them and watched both their faces shift in real time. Emma looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Mom's lips pressed into a tight line. Maybe next time, I said. Don't fire the guy who built your house when you can't even hold a hammer. Emma snapped. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Oh, deeply. I'm considering printing this testimonial on a mug. Then I gave them the smile. You know the one. That you played yourself smile. Emma made a sound I can only describe as a cross between a hiss and a curse she didn't say out loud, then stormed down the hallway in her heels like the ground had insulted her ancestors. Mom stayed behind for a moment. Liam, she said quietly, you're burning bridges. I nodded. Yeah, but I brought marshmallows. And then I closed the door. Again, this time for good. And I meant it. There was no dramatic music, no slow-motion montage of me weeping after they left. I didn't look longingly at a photo of us at the beach when we were kids. There was no softening, no second-guessing. I sat back down at my desk, opened up my laptop, and got back to work because unlike Emma, I had actual clients who relied on me, not just a Pinterest board and a vision board taped to a coffee cup. Days passed, then weeks, and the silence from my family? Absolutely golden. Like the kind of silence you get on a Sunday morning when it's raining and the power's out and nobody's asking you to fix something you didn't break. Peace. But of course, word travels fast in the world of self-imploding businesses. Within a month, I started hearing little things from people I knew who still had some degree of contact with them. I never asked for updates, but oh boy, the universe loves a petty man who minds his business. Emma's branding initiative had apparently included a social media campaign where she compared her journey to a phoenix rising from the ashes of male-dominated mediocrity, which might have worked if she hadn't accidentally tweeted it from the company's official account, while a male client was tagged in the same thread. They lost that client in under 5 minutes. Then there was the office incident. She had decided to remodel the workspace for a more artsy, collaborative flow. What that meant in practice. She removed all the desks and replaced them with bean bags. Bean bags. For a team of over-caffeinated creatives juggling laptops, graphics tablets, and external monitors. One guy's back gave out. Another quit mid-Zoom call after sliding out of a bean bag in front of a client. The office manager apparently just stopped showing up. Meanwhile, my mom doubled down on her classic tactic, denial. She kept posting inspirational Facebook quotes like, "Tough times never last, but tough families do," paired with stock photos of eagles flying through storm clouds. One of my old high school friends texted me, "Your mom's Facebook is turning into a motivational calendar from 2003. Should I be concerned? Dad, from what I gathered, had attempted to take a more active role in the business to help Emma navigate the chaos. Which, translated from family speak, many tried to call some old clients from my time and convince them to come back. You know what happened? One of them emailed me. Said, "Hey, just wanted you to know your dad tried to sell me on working with Emma again. I told him I'd rather invest in a banana stand run by raccoons." Banana stand. Raccoons. I framed that email. So yeah, it was falling apart. The Instagram page dried up. The website went from cutting-edge creative agency to 404 not found. I checked out of curiosity one day, and the last blog post was titled, "Innovation Means Letting Go." A fitting eulogy, honestly. Then quiet. Radio silence. No calls. No messages. No baked goods. They had finally accepted what I had known all along. I wasn't coming back. I wasn't going to play fixer-upper to their crumbling sandcastle. And let me tell you, cutting them off was the greatest gift I ever gave myself. Because without the weight of their expectations, their judgments, their manipulations, I soared. My business? Tripled its revenue in a year. I spoke at conferences. Got invited to do podcasts, which I politely declined, because I don't need to tell strangers about my grind set while sipping green juice on a white couch. I mentored young entrepreneurs, ones who actually listened, who wanted to learn, not just be handed the CEO title because they bought a new blazer and a copy of Atomic Habits. I bought a cabin by a lake. Started dating again. I even bought a new car, not flashy, just nice. One of those ones with heated seats and Bluetooth that actually works. And every now and then, I'd get that old itch, wondering if maybe I should check in, see if the family ever recovered, if they were doing better. But then I'd get home, open my door to my quiet, clean apartment, and think, why ruin a perfectly good day? Some people say success is the best revenge. I disagree. Pieces. Success is loud, flashy, temporary. Peace is what you feel when you close a door and know, deep in your bones, that no one on the other side has the power to open it again. And that, my friends, is how I became the villain in their story, and the hero in mine. My name is Callum Hayes. I'm 29, and for most of my life the running joke at family gatherings has been me. I learned early that some people don't laugh because something's funny. They laugh to make sure you know where you stand. In my family, there was a seating chart you couldn't see. My sister Nora at the center with the bright career and the perfect smile. My brother Ethan orbiting our dad's approval like a moon that never dares drift. My mother arranging napkins into swans while pretending ignorance is kindness. My Aunt Lorraine armed with gossip and a glass of sweet tea that was never just tea. And me, Callum, somewhere near the folding chairs, useful only when a printer jammed or someone needed a Wi-Fi password. Whenever I got a text about a reunion, it felt less like an invitation and more like a summons, the kind where you already know you'll have to prove you belong in a room that still calls you the one who didn't finish. If you ask my family, my reputation started with sophomore year of college when I withdrew 2 weeks after midterms. They'll tell you I gave up and ran off and made a mess, because that version is easy to fold into a story they already believed about me. The truth was a lot less dramatic and a lot lonelier. A professor pulled me aside and explained that my financial aid package had changed, a paperwork hiccup that would likely be resolved next semester. Except the math didn't lie. The money was gone now. Bills were immediate, rent didn't negotiate, and my part-time job at a campus cafe couldn't cover a black hole. I let the registrar print out the withdrawal form and walked home with the paper in my pocket, telling myself it would just be 1 semester off. That's not how my family remembers it. He quit college to chase some scheme, Aunt Lorraine likes to say. Our stories split there and never found their way back. After I left school, I worked 2 jobs, then 3. I learned to repair phones at a strip mall kiosk under humming lights that made your skin look gray. I drove a battered sedan at night with a back seat that smelled like fries and spilled soda. I slept 5 hours on good days and dreamed in numbers. Rent due on the 1st, loan interest due on the 15th, a paycheck that hit at 12:03 a.m. if the payroll system felt generous. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that I was on the off-ramp and just hadn't found the lane again. What I didn't say out loud was that sometimes I liked the work. There was a pattern to making broken things whole. A cracked screen becomes a glass pane again. A dead battery wakes up at 87%. Sitting hunched over a tiny board with tweezers and solder, I could concentrate in a way that made the rest of the world dim. It felt like solving a puzzle everyone else had decided wasn't worth their time. The first time I told my dad I could fix his phone instead of him buying a new one, he frowned at the kitchen table and said, "You're not a technician, Callum. You're a kid who never finished what he started." He didn't mean it as cruelly as it landed. In my house, statements like that were considered neutral facts. Mom slipped a casserole into the oven and said, bright as ever, "Well, maybe a professional should take a look, sweetie." We wouldn't want to make it worse. That was how love sounded there, like careful steering away from the thing you were trying to say. By dessert, Aunt Lorraine was texting herself reminders to share the update with cousins. "He's doing phone screens now. Poor thing." I watched the family group chat light up with sympathetic thumbs and shocked faces, and then flipped my phone face down. You learn to set your own notifications. What you'll let in, what you'll ignore. People say your 20s are for experimenting. Mine were for shutting doors softly and walking away. I stopped bringing girlfriends to holidays. I stopped applying for jobs that required a degree because I could hear my father's sigh in the margins of every application. Instead, I got good, quietly good, at a narrow thing almost nobody else cared about. I learned board-level repairs. I learned data recovery. I learned that small businesses bled cash when their point-of-sale machines died on a Saturday. I learned that if you could show up on time, return devices when you promised, and speak to people without making them feel stupid, you could negotiate your own price. Word of mouth did what family never tried to do. There's a kind of humility that grows in the cracks where approval should have been. I cultivated it without even knowing. I rented a workbench in the back of a computer shop owned by a retired teacher who thought the world of me, because unlike my family, he liked the version of me who existed in plain sight. On paper, I was still the kid who left school. On invoices, I was the guy who saved a school's attendance records and kept a bakery open after a lightning strike. Those felt like two different people until, slowly, they became the same one. When Nora got engaged last winter, the family group chat turned into a fireworks show. Everyone had opinions about venues and color palettes and photographers. Dad promised to cover the bar. Mom started a Pinterest board. Ethan offered to take care of the playlist, like he was volunteering for war. I typed congratulations and sent a gift I could afford, a private session with a chef I did some recovery work for, who owed me a favor and genuinely liked Nora. She was the only one who sometimes texted me on random Tuesdays to ask how my week was going. The only person who occasionally said, "You know, Callum, you're really good at what you do." That meant something, even if I never said so. It was Nora who called the morning of the reunion and said, "You're coming, right? Please say yes." It wasn't actually about the reunion. It was about the wedding. She wanted the whole family on neutral ground before we all collided in tuxedos and seating charts. "It would mean a lot," she added. "She has my mother's voice, but not the habit of arranging the truth, so it looks nicer." I hesitated. Then I pictured her fiancé, Mark, who I'd met twice. A tall, polite civil engineer with steady eyes who listened more than he spoke. He asked questions the way people ask if they can pet your dog, aware of boundaries, respectful, interested if invited. I got the sense he hadn't been to many Hayes reunions. I said yes. The reunion was at my Aunt Lorraine's house, which looks like a magazine layout, the kind that insists every surface should have a bowl on it. The front lawn hadn't a single rebellious blade of grass. The kitchen was already hot from the oven and the gossip. I parked down the street and sat in my car for 1 minute longer than necessary. It's the ritual you do before a place that has decided who you are. I took a breath, then another. The rearview mirror showed a face I sometimes didn't recognize, a little older, jaw a shade tighter. Then I got out and walked toward the noise. Lorraine met me at the door because of course she did. Don't expect any respect here. You're still the failure who never finished college, she said, smiling the way people smile when they think honesty equals virtue. Her perfume drifted out first, then her bracelet clinked as she stepped aside, a tiny bell to summon the room's attention. Behind her, I could see heads tilt. Cousins noted my shoes. An uncle raised his brows as if checking whether I'd dressed up enough to fail in. My mother looked away as if someone had called her from a different room. My father, who always stands with one hand in his pocket and one on a drink, did both, which is a trick I still don't understand. Happy reunion to you too, I said lightly. If there is a uniform for surviving family gatherings, mine is the easy tone, the shrug that says none of this lands. I stepped inside, kissed my mother's cheek, shook my father's hand. He squeezed too long, which is his way of saying behave. Ethan clapped my shoulder like I was a co-worker he'd decided to tolerate and leaned in. Just don't embarrass us tonight, okay? He said it quietly, for my benefit, as though he was doing me a favor by keeping the insult personal. Wouldn't dream of it, I replied, and he laughed like we were sharing a joke. Maybe we were. I wasn't sure which of us was meant to be the punchline. The first hour was a choreography of small talk and thinly veiled comparisons. Lorraine pressed a lemonade into my hand and announced loudly, "Non-alcoholic for Callum," as if I had ever had a public incident to justify that choice. A cousin my age asked if I'd found anything stable yet, with a sympathy tilt to her head, like she was talking to someone who had recently lost a pet. My uncle asked if I still tinkered with gadgets, and before I could answer, my father chuckled and said, "He keeps busy." The words hung under the ceiling fan like a fruit that never ripens. I nodded and changed the subject to sports I didn't follow because that made everyone more comfortable. Nora found me by the deviled eggs, pressed a quick hug into my side, and whispered, "I'm sorry," in that way siblings do when they're apologizing for something much bigger than a moment. Her fiancé, Mark, hovered nearby, doing that calm, attentive thing of his, asking her mother about flower arrangements, helping move a cooler without being asked. He saw me and brightened. "Hey, Callum," he said, putting out a hand. A normal handshake, a human handshake, not a measuring contest. "Glad you could make it." He meant it, which was rare currency in that room. I stayed close to the edges. Old habits. It's easier to exit from there if you need to, and you can see incoming weather. The kitchen island became the center of gravity, cold salads, a honey-baked ham, a plate of crackers arranged like dominoes. Someone had put a framed photo of my grandparents on the counter, and their faces looked fresher than anyone in the room. They'd had these reunions too, I realized. Different menu, same theater. At some point, conversations braided into bigger ones. Someone retold the story of how Nora landed her new job, with the details inflated just enough to make my mother's eyes shine. Ethan announced he was maybe moving up at his firm and let the maybe dangle like bait. There was a toast to Nora and Mark's upcoming wedding, which became a second toast when Lorraine realized the first hadn't included a pointed message about families sticking together no matter what. I lifted my glass with everyone else and swallowed lemonade that had gone warm in my hand. Then came the tiny shift, the one that always starts the avalanche. Lorraine's neighbor stepped in with a casserole, and because I was nearest the door, I took it. "Careful," she said, surprised. "Wow, strong. What do you do, young man?" It was innocent. She didn't know the language we speak in that house, the script that says you may ask Nora about her team and Ethan about his clients, but you ask me only about the weather. "I repair and recover data," I said before I could package it into something smaller. "I run a small operation." I cut off the extra words, the ones that would have sounded like bragging or defense, and set the casserole down. Lorraine's ear twitched. My father's gaze slid over without turning his head. You could feel the temperature change by a degree. "Recover data?" Mark asked, curious. "Like for phones? Or companies?" His tone didn't have skepticism in it. It had interest, which is a difference my family taught me to register like a weather warning. I nodded. "Both," I said. "Mostly small businesses. Schools. Medical practices." I was preparing to divert, to ask him about a bridge he was working on or a road project that had surprised him, when Aunt Lorraine's voice, bright as a chandelier, cut through. "He's being modest," she sang, and for a moment my heart weirdly lifted, because Lorraine never called me modest. Then she added, "He's very good at tinkering. We keep him around because he can fix the toaster." Laughter. Not cruel. Exactly. Just easy, and at my expense. The neighbor smiled politely, unsure. My mother shifted a napkin. My father sipped his drink. I have learned there are options in a moment like that. You can correct the record. It will be taken as aggression. You can joke back. It will be filed under defensive and repeated later as proof that you cannot take a joke. You can leave. That becomes a story someone else gets to tell. Or you can do what I did, which is smile with your eyes and not your teeth, and let it pass through you like weather. The toaster never thanks me, I said lightly. I'm still waiting on a card. It got a ripple. The neighbor laughed. The moment slid by, but a note had been struck, and the song had started. Dinner found me next to Mark at the long table, while Nora ran point on courses and conversation. Lorraine had placed me there. I could tell by the place cards, between Mark and a cousin who collects other people's business like charms on a bracelet. Across from me, my father held court with Ethan, performing competence by talking about things he didn't build. Mark leaned in, quiet. "Can I ask you more about your work?" he said, voice low enough that it didn't carry. I nodded. He asked good questions, not the kind that look for weak spots, but the kind that cost time and attention. I gave careful answers. He was about to ask another when Nora's maid of honor, one of those people who is always popping over, dropped into the empty chair on Mark's other side. "So what do you do?" she asked me, not unkindly, just loudly, because that's her volume and because she had no idea that the table had rules. Around us, forks paused. Heads turned on instinct. There it was again, the start of weather. I felt my aunt's ears perk from 3 seats away. I heard Ethan's breath hitch, because he loved these moments, little stages where I was supposed to trip. My father's eyes went soft in that way he did when he braced for what he considered my overcomplication of simple questions. Mom smiled tightly and pressed her palm flat on the tablecloth like she could smooth the room. "I repair and recover data," I said again, gently. "I run a small shop, plus some consulting." The maid of honor blinked. Consulting for who? And before I could flatten the truth into something that fit the timeline everyone had written for me, Mark, noticing the puzzle in my answer and the heat of the room, did what engineers do. He reached for his phone to find a reference point. "What's your business called?" he asked, casual, curious, simply trying to complete a picture. I told him the name. He typed it into the search bar. The screen lit his face. The table noise thinned into a clear, high silence, the kind that comes right before a glass tips or the power goes out. And while he waited for the results to load, I watched something move across his expression, a small shift of recognition, then focus, then something sharper I couldn't name yet. He looked from the phone up to me as if to confirm that we were talking about the same person. Across the table, I could feel my aunt leaning, my brother smirking, my father's hand tightening around his fork. Mark's thumb hovered, 1 inch above a link I knew too well. Mark's thumb hovered over the link, but before he could tap it, Lorraine's voice cut in like a knife. "Careful what you look up, Mark," she trilled, lifting her glass. "You might get bored scrolling through stories of broken microwaves and secondhand laptops." A ripple of laughter followed, cousins snickering like kids at the back of a classroom. Ethan leaned in across the table with a smirk that said he couldn't wait to watch me squirm. "Yeah, let's not embarrass him," he added. "We all know Callum's career path is kind of a family mystery." Mom pretended to fuss with the salt shaker, her silence a signal that she wouldn't step in. Dad tapped his fork against his plate, the metallic click carrying more weight than words. It was his way of saying, "Don't escalate, don't make a scene." I felt my face heat, but I forced myself to breathe slowly, to keep my expression neutral. Years of practice had taught me the art of stillness, how to take the barbs without giving them the satisfaction of watching you bleed. Meanwhile, Nora's eyes flicked between me and Mark, silently pleading for calm. She knew what was coming. Every reunion had its script, and I was always cast as the character who never measured up. Lorraine leaned forward, lowering her voice just enough to make the words sharper. "It's sweet, really. Everyone needs a hobby. Keeps him out of trouble." Across the table, one cousin muttered something about me, still living paycheck to paycheck, loud enough for others to hear. Forks clinked, heads shook, and the air thickened with that familiar mix of pity and amusement. I wanted to vanish. But part of me, quiet, stubborn, also wanted to hold my ground. I looked at Mark, who still had his phone in hand, the screen glowing faintly. His brows were furrowed now, but not in mockery. He looked curious, maybe even unsettled. "So," he said carefully, You handle data recovery? He emphasized the last two words, like he was trying to drag the conversation back to neutral ground. Lorraine rolled her eyes and raised her voice again. Mark, darling, don't encourage him. He'll start talking in acronyms and wires, and we'll all die of boredom before dessert. The table chuckled. My father finally spoke, his voice low but firm. Let's not get carried away. On the surface, it was a call for peace, but I knew the subtext. Callum, swallow it down. Don't push back. Don't ruin the evening. My chest tightened as I stared at my plate. For years, I'd done just that. Kept quiet. Let them shape my narrative into something pathetic and unfinished. Tonight, though, something felt different. Maybe it was Nora's pleading glance, or Mark's steady gaze, or the simple fact that I was tired of being reduced to a caricature every time I walked through this door. But still, I stayed silent. For now, that silence gave them permission to keep going. Ethan leaned back in his chair, grinning. You know what's funny? He said, voice rising. Every time I go out, someone asks if I'm related to Callum. I never know what to say. I mean, what would you tell people if your brother was fixing coffee machines for a living? The cousins roared. Lorraine covered her mouth like she'd just heard the most scandalous secret. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. Dad sipped his drink without looking at me. The laughter echoed around the table, and I could feel myself shrinking into the same corner I'd occupied for years. But then I caught Mark glancing at his phone again, his thumb tapping, his jaw tightening ever so slightly as he read. His expression shifted from curiosity to something colder, sharper. He looked at me, then at the rest of the table, and I realized he had found what they were all too blind, or too unwilling, to see. And that's where the tension began to thrum, louder than their laughter. The laughter around the table hadn't even died down when Ethan decided to twist the knife. He leaned back in his chair, the smugness practically dripping from his grin. Actually, he said, raising his voice just enough for everyone to hear. You know what's really crazy? Last year, Dad almost had to cover one of Callum's bills because he was short on rent. Isn't that right? He looked at me with mock innocence, as if daring me to deny it. The room went quiet in that way it always does before a storm. Forks frozen halfway to mouths, eyes darting between me and my father. I clenched my jaw because I knew exactly what he was referring to. Months ago, before one of my biggest contracts had come through, I'd asked Dad, not for money, but for a short-term loan I intended to pay back in full. He'd refused, and that was the end of it. Or so I thought. I'd kept that conversation private, humiliating as it already was. But now Ethan had dragged it out into the open, twisting the truth into something poisonous. Don't look so surprised, Ethan chuckled, glancing at my cousins. Some people just never figure it out. You can't rely on dreams to pay the bills. My face burned, and for a split second, I thought I might actually stand up and leave. But then Dad cleared his throat, his voice calm but edged with disappointment. It's true, he said flatly. Callum came to me when he was in trouble. I told him he needed to stand on his own 2 feet. We don't reward failure in this family. Failure. The word landed like a brick in my chest. And the worst part? He didn't even sound angry, just resigned, like it was an immutable fact of my existence. Mom tried to jump in with a nervous laugh, saying, well, it all worked out, didn't it? But the damage was already done. My cousins were whispering. Lorraine wore a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Nora's eyes widened, flashing between me and Dad, and Mark froze mid-bite, his phone still lit up beside his plate. I stared at my father, the betrayal heavier than anything Ethan could have thrown at me. He hadn't needed to confirm it. He could have brushed it off, defended me, or simply said nothing. But instead, he chose to humiliate me in front of everyone, using my lowest moment as proof that I was exactly who they believed me to be. Stand on my own 2 feet. I repeated softly, my voice steady but low. My father didn't meet my eyes. He just reached for his glass again, as if the matter was settled. That was the turning point. Something inside me shifted, like a door slamming shut. For years, I'd tolerated the snide remarks, the digs, the sideways glances. But hearing my father, my own father, label me as a failure, not in private, but as a public declaration to everyone at the table, was the moment I realized the gulf between us wasn't just wide. It was permanent. And just as that thought settled in my chest, Mark finally tapped the link on his phone. His eyes widened as the page loaded, and I watched his face drain of color. Whatever he had just seen, it wasn't the story Lorraine and Ethan had been peddling. He looked at me like he was seeing someone completely different, and the silence that followed was heavier than the betrayal itself. That was when I knew everything at this table was about to change. The betrayal clung to me like smoke. I could still hear my father's words echoing in my skull. "We don't reward failure in this family," as if he'd been waiting years for the perfect stage to say them. I sat frozen at the table, unable to force another bite of food past the knot in my throat. Everyone else went back to their plates, though the air was charged, awkward, humming with the aftershocks of what had just been said. I wasn't even Callum the relative anymore. I was Callum the cautionary tale, the example they'd passed down to their kids about what not to become. I excused myself quietly, slipping out onto the back porch with my glass of lemonade still in hand. The air was cool, a relief against my burning face, but it didn't soothe the heaviness in my chest. I leaned against the railing, listening to the muffled laughter inside. It was surreal, how quickly they could move on after cutting me open. To them, this was routine. I was the family's designated failure, and tonight, they'd just added another story to the growing pile. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A friend had sent me a text, asking if I wanted to grab a late drink, nothing urgent. I stared at it for a long time, realizing that outside this house, I wasn't treated like a punchline. Outside, I was simply Callum, the guy who solved problems, kept his word, showed up when it mattered. Inside, I was nothing but the space they needed to fill with their disappointment. And for the first time, the thought hit me hard. Maybe I didn't have to keep showing up at all. Still, leaving right then felt impossible. Nora had begged me to come, and Mark's confused expression lingered in my mind. He'd seen something on that screen, and I wasn't sure if he understood what it meant yet. If I left now, the narrative would belong to them. They'd say, "See, he can't even handle dinner without storming out." I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. So I stayed, even as I sank lower inside myself. When I returned to the table, the conversation had shifted. Ethan was bragging about a promotion he might get, and Lorraine was busy recounting a story about one of her neighbors. I slipped back into my seat like a ghost, invisible, irrelevant. Nobody asked where I'd gone. Nobody looked my way. Even my mother's eyes skimmed past me, too afraid to linger. That's when the loneliness hit me harder than the humiliation. I realized I wasn't just sitting at a table full of relatives. I was sitting at a table full of strangers who had long ago decided I didn't belong. I was blood without bond. Family by name, not by heart. And in that moment, I started to imagine a life without them, a life where their voices didn't echo in my head every time I tried to take pride in something. I kept my face calm, my movement steady, but inside, gears were beginning to turn. If this was how they truly saw me, then fine. I could live with their silence, their mockery, their willful ignorance. But one day they would see, not through my words, not through arguments, but through something undeniable, something that didn't need defending. For the rest of dinner, I barely spoke. I let them laugh, let them boast, let them pile another story onto the tower of failures they thought defined me. I let myself sink to rock bottom, because there was a strange clarity down there, an understanding that you could either stay buried or start building something from the ground up. And as I sat there in that silence, with the weight of my father's betrayal still pressing against my chest, I made a quiet decision. If they wanted me to play the failure, I'd let them. Because the day would come when the truth would crash through their carefully constructed narrative, and when it did, it would be louder than all their laughter combined. That thought was the only thing that kept me upright as the night dragged on. I left that reunion with my chest tight, but something in me had hardened. Driving home through the dark streets, the voices replayed over and over. Ethan's smug laughter, my father's casual condemnation, Lorraine's mocking tone. For years, those echoes had kept me small, like I was trapped in the shape they carved for me. But that night, the hurt settled into something sharper, resolve. I couldn't change how they saw me, but I could decide what I built outside their view. In the weeks that followed, I buried myself in work, not as an escape, but as fuel. My little operation, the one they brushed off as tinkering, was quietly becoming something larger. Word of mouth had already spread through the city, but I began thinking bigger. I formalized the business, filing the paperwork, getting a clean new logo, and setting up contracts that made it clear I wasn't just fixing gadgets. I was offering a specialized service, data recovery, and secure system support. Schools, clinics, and even law firms needed someone who could step in fast when everything went dark, and I had built a reputation for being exactly that person. The first big break came from a mid-sized medical practice. Their entire patient database was locked after a ransomware attack. Panic was written across their faces when they called me, late on a Friday night. I drove over, worked all weekend, and by Monday morning, I had not only restored their files, but put safeguards in place that most IT firms would have charged 5 times more to set up. The practice manager shook my hand like I had saved her life. A week later, she referred me to 2 more clinics. 1 contract became 3, 3 became 5. Soon, I wasn't just patching problems. I was building preventative systems, advising leadership teams, and earning retainers that made my old hourly rates look laughable. By the end of the year, I had enough steady work to bring on help. I hired a former classmate who had bounced around dead-end tech jobs and was thrilled to find stability. Then another. I rented a small office space downtown. Nothing flashy, just a 2-room setup with a reception desk and enough space for workbenches and equipment. Still, when I turned the key on that first morning, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't a hobby. This wasn't tinkering. It was a business, mine, and it was growing. Meanwhile, the recognition started creeping in. A local business magazine ran a feature about young entrepreneurs making an impact in the city. They called my company one of the fastest-growing independent tech recovery services in the region. A client in the legal sector mentioned me to a state official, which led to a contract offer I wouldn't have dared dream of 5 years earlier. Checks came in with more zeros. For the first time, I wasn't scrambling to cover bills. I was making investments, building reserves, thinking about long-term growth. But it wasn't just the money. It was the shift in how people outside my family saw me. Clients introduced me at events with phrases like, "the guy who saved our business," or "the expert you need to know." Friends leaned on me not for favors, but for advice, genuinely valuing my perspective. Even my employees looked at me like a leader, someone worth following. And slowly, I started to look in the mirror and recognize that person too. Still, I kept it quiet. My family had made it clear they weren't interested in hearing about my world, and I had no desire to defend myself again. I let them believe whatever version of me they needed to. But deep down, I knew the gap between who they thought I was and who I had become was widening by the day. I didn't flaunt my success. I didn't post about it in the family group chat. I didn't bring it up at holidays when Lorraine inevitably asked if I was still fixing toasters. I simply smiled, shrugged, and changed the subject. Because I understood something they didn't. Vindication wasn't in arguing. It was in patience. And with every new contract, every headline, every late-night drive back from another saved system, I felt that patience solidify. The day was coming when I wouldn't have to say a word. The truth would make its way into the light on its own. And when it did, the silence from my family would be louder than anything they'd ever said to me. For now, I let them think I was still at the bottom. But quietly, steadily, I was climbing, higher than they ever expected. And soon enough, the view from the top would force them to look up. It was about a year after that reunion when the setup for everything began to fall into place, almost by accident. My company had grown into a small but formidable presence in the city. We weren't just patching systems anymore. We were under contract with schools, clinics, and a few law firms that treated us like part of their backbone. I had a team of 5, a proper office, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving month to month. I was strategizing, planning. But the real turning point came when one of my biggest clients, a regional bank, suffered a catastrophic server failure. Their IT firm had botched the backups, and they called me in desperation on a Sunday night. I pulled 2 of my employees in, and we worked around the clock for 3 straight days. When it was over, they offered me something that made my head spin, an ongoing security contract with a retainer larger than my entire annual income just a few years prior. That contract opened doors I hadn't even considered. Suddenly, I was in boardrooms with executives, shaking hands with people who had their fingers on real levers of power. One of them, a board member who also chaired a regional business development council, asked if I'd be willing to speak on a panel about cybersecurity and small businesses. I said yes, and that one event spiraled into more. Local news segments, business journals, podcasts. I became the data recovery guy in the city, the one people called when everything was falling apart. And then came the invitation that made my stomach flip. Nora called one afternoon, sounding frazzled. "Hey, Callum," she said. "This is random. But would you mind meeting with Mark's company? They're working on a major project and having a data management nightmare. I told him you might be able to help." Mark's company wasn't just some firm. It was a nationally recognized engineering outfit with contracts worth millions. Sitting across from their project managers a week later, I realized I wasn't just troubleshooting anymore. I was architecting systems, designing the digital framework for projects that would shape skylines. The deal went through, and suddenly, I was tied directly to the company that would soon be joining my family through marriage. That's when it clicked. I wasn't just successful now. I was in a position where people who had once dismissed me depended on me, sometimes directly, sometimes through networks they didn't even know I was part of. I could play this quietly, invisibly, until the right moment came to let the truth unfold. At the same time, whispers of my success began trickling back through the grapevine. A cousin mentioned seeing me in a business article. An uncle joked that I must be rolling in it now, but quickly changed the subject. Even my father, though he never acknowledged it outright, started asking oddly specific questions during phone calls with Nora, questions she later admitted were really about me. Does Callum really have an office? How many employees does he actually have? He never asked me directly, of course. That would have required facing the fact that he'd been wrong. Still, I kept my silence. I let them wonder. I let them fill in the blanks with their own suspicions. Because I knew the setup wasn't complete yet. The final piece slid into place when I was invited to join a regional business council myself, the same one where my client's board member had first opened doors for me. Sitting around that table, I realized just how much influence I now carried. Grants, contracts, partnerships, these weren't just numbers anymore. They were opportunities one could steer, recommend, or withhold. And suddenly, the balance of power between me and the family that had branded me a failure felt very different. I didn't announce it. I didn't brag. I simply tucked it away, patient as ever, waiting for the moment when all the years of mockery and dismissal would come crashing into the reality of who I had become. And when Nora's wedding date drew closer, and I knew the whole family would gather again in one room, with Mark's colleagues, with their polished image on display, I realized the stage was setting itself. I wouldn't need to say a word. The truth would speak for me. The wedding day arrived in the kind of golden haze you only get in late summer. The venue was a stately manor on the edge of the city, all white columns and manicured lawns, the sort of place that my father would point to and say, "Now that's class." Nora looked radiant, Mark steady and proud at her side. And for once the family seemed united under a single purpose: appearances. Smiles were polished, suits pressed, laughter a little too loud, the kind that strains at the edges. I arrived early, not because I wanted to mingle, but because I wanted to see the place without all the noise. The staff greeted me by name. Mark had insisted I come as more than just family, but as a guest of importance. That small detail already shifted the tone. Inside, the reception hall gleamed, and tucked neatly at the corner of the bar was a small placard listing the evening's sponsors. My company's logo was right there, alongside a handful of recognizable corporations. It wasn't gaudy or oversized. It was subtle, but undeniable. My family wouldn't notice it right away, but eventually, they would. During the ceremony, I kept quiet, content to watch Nora glow with happiness. But at the reception, when the music softened and the dinner began, the stage for revenge quietly built itself. Mark's colleagues had come in full force: engineers, project managers, even a few executives. I recognized some of them from meetings. They recognized me too, and they didn't hesitate to cross the room, shake my hand, and thank me for the work I'd done. "Callum, you really saved us during that system crash," one manager said warmly, clapping my shoulder. "We wouldn't have delivered on time without you." Another leaned in, voice low but reverent. "Your security framework was genius. Honestly, I've never seen anyone move that fast." I thanked them, modest but deliberate, every word chosen with care. And all the while, I felt the stares. Lorraine pausing mid-laugh to listen in. Ethan stiffening, his fork halfway to his mouth. My father's jaw tightening as yet another guest approached me first, not him. Even Mom glanced nervously between the faces, as though trying to process a puzzle she'd never been taught how to solve. Then came the moment I hadn't expected. During the speeches, Mark stood with his glass raised and began thanking people. He spoke of Nora's kindness, of his parents' support, of the joy of the day. And then, casually but firmly, he added, "And I want to thank Callum. Most of you know him as Nora's brother, but what you may not realize is that he's the reason my company made it through one of our toughest challenges this year. His work didn't just save us, it allowed us to grow, to expand, to be here today with less worry on our shoulders. Callum, you've been incredible, and I'm honored to call you family." The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was real, genuine. People turned toward me, nodding, clapping. For once, the attention wasn't pity or mockery, it was respect. I raised my glass, calm, steady, not gloating, just acknowledging. My father's hand trembled slightly as he set his drink down. Ethan's smile had vanished completely. Lorraine whispered something sharp to a cousin, but her eyes betrayed her. She was rattled. As dinner continued, I didn't need to push the revenge any further. The work was doing it for me. One by one, Mark's colleagues sought me out, asking for business cards, dropping hints about future projects. My company's name came up in conversations my family couldn't control, on lips they respected too much to dismiss. And each time, I caught the flicker of realization spreading across their faces. The person they had mocked, belittled, and cast aside was standing in the very center of the success they admired. I didn't gloat. I didn't throw their words back at them. I simply stayed calm, polite, measured. Because the true revenge wasn't in shouting, "I told you so." It was in making them sit there, helpless, as the world they wanted so badly to impress turned toward me instead. By the time dessert was served, the shift was complete. No one dared mention failure. No one joked about tinkering. Even Ethan sat silent. His usual arrogance evaporated. My father avoided my gaze entirely, his silence more damning than any words he could have spoken. And as I sipped my coffee, the hum of conversation swirling around me, I realized I hadn't needed to destroy them with anger or spite. The truth itself had been enough. Still, I could feel something more building, an opportunity not just to let them stew in silence, but to deliver the final, undeniable reminder of who I had become. The night wasn't over yet. The final moment came not with shouting, not with some grand reveal, but with a quiet detail that no one at the reunion table a year ago would have ever imagined. After dessert, as people began to drift toward the dance floor, Mark's father approached me with a firm handshake. He was a tall man, commanding in presence, the kind of person my father would normally bend himself in knots to impress. "Callum," he said warmly, "Mark's told me everything you've done for his firm. Truly impressive work. You should be proud." I thanked him, modestly as always. But then he added, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "We were actually just talking last week about how invaluable your company has become to the region. The council is lucky to have you. You've built something remarkable." The words landed like a gavel strike. My father's glass froze halfway to his lips. Ethan blinked hard, the color draining from his smug expression. Lorraine's mouth opened and closed, no words managing to escape. And in that suspended silence, every insult they'd ever thrown at me, every failure, every mocking laugh, hung in the air, exposed for what they were, lies they told themselves to keep me small. I didn't look at them right away. Instead, I nodded graciously to Mark's father, exchanged a few polite words, and only then turned my gaze to my family. My father's eyes finally met mine, but for the first time in my life, he had nothing to say. No lecture, no sigh of disappointment, not even a half-hearted joke. Just silence, heavy and undeniable. Ethan fiddled with his tie, pretending to check his phone. Lorraine busied herself with her napkin, cheeks flushed red. For years, they had waited for the world to confirm their version of me. That night, the world had done the opposite. And the beauty of it was that I hadn't had to argue, hadn't had to fight, hadn't even had to raise my voice. Reality had done all the work. Later, when the music swelled and people crowded the dance floor, Nora slipped over and hugged me tightly. "I told you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "One day they'd see." I didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. I simply let the moment sink in. The sight of my family, for once, unable to look down on me. They had mocked me into the ground, but now they were the ones squirming in the silence, forced to choke down the truth with every polite smile. As the night wound down, I stood near the edge of the room, watching them scatter like shadows under a rising sun. And that's when it hit me, clear and final. They hadn't just lost the power to call me a failure. They had lost me. And for the first time, I walked away from them with my head high, knowing they would never forget the silence that followed in my wake. My name's Leo, I'm 31, and until recently, I thought I had a decent relationship with my younger sister, Haley. We weren't exactly the finish each other's sentences type of siblings, but I showed up when it mattered. Birthday gifts, holiday flights, last-minute Venmo transfers when her rent was short, nothing over the top, just quiet support. I always figured that's what family was for. We had our differences, sure. She was always more dramatic, the center of attention type, while I preferred staying on the sidelines. But we coexisted fine. At least, I thought we did. Haley got engaged last year to a guy named Mason. He was fine, bland, a little too into crypto, but he made her laugh, and he had good hair, so I figured he'd do. My parents were over the moon. Haley was the golden child, the youngest, the one everyone coddled. When they got engaged, it was like the family went into overdrive. Bridal showers, engagement brunches, endless group chats about centerpieces and color palettes. I sent a congratulatory gift and mostly stayed out of it. That is, until I got a call from Haley. "Leo, I need a huge favor," she said, her voice syrupy and sweet. "We're a little short on the final venue payment. Like, really short." I asked how short. She hesitated, then dropped it casually. "About 50 grand. I choked. "You're joking." "No, but like, it wouldn't be a loan. More like a wedding gift. I mean, I'm your only sister, Leo. And Mom said you've been doing really well lately." To be fair, I had been doing well. I'd sold my app startup 6 months earlier and was in the process of launching something new. Money wasn't a problem at that moment, and Haley knew it. Still, the number stung. I hesitated. "That's a lot to just give away, Hales." She immediately switched to guilt mode. "You didn't come to my dress fitting. Or my engagement dinner. You're always distant. And now you can't even help on my wedding day?" I could feel the setup tightening around me. I sighed. "Fine, but I want it to be a surprise. I'll bring it the day of, okay?" No fanfare. She squealed, thanked me a dozen times, and hung up. That should have been my first red flag. The wedding was set at this swanky vineyard about an hour outside the city. I arrived early, dressed in a tailored suit, envelope in my pocket. The kind of envelope that weighed nothing but could pay off someone's student loans. I walked past the string quartet and the flower walls and made my way inside, looking for the guest table to find my seat. And that's where everything started to go sideways. There was a massive seating chart at the front. Hand-calligraphed names, golden accents, cute little wax seals next to the names of important guests. I scanned the list. My parents were at table 2. Haley's friends were scattered across the front. I kept looking. And looking. No, Leo. I thought maybe they'd forgotten, so I walked to the reception area to see if I could find my place card manually. I checked the main tables. Nothing. Then I walked toward the far side of the room, past the caterer station, past the back exit, until I saw a single folding chair placed awkwardly by the bathroom hallway. And taped to the back? A sticky note. Scribbled in pen. "Leo." I stared at it for a long second, genuinely thinking it had to be a mistake. Like maybe someone was pranking me, or it was a placeholder. But nope. No joke. No real seat. Just me and the faint scent of air freshener from the guest bathroom. Before I could even react, I heard a voice behind me. "Well, not everyone's important enough for the main table," someone said with a light, condescending laugh. I turned. It was Mason's mother. I'd only met her once before, briefly, and we hadn't exchanged more than a few sentences. But her tone was unmistakable. Smug. Dismissive. Like she'd been waiting for this moment. I looked around the room again. Every table had name cards, thick cardstock, gold trim, personalized calligraphy. Even Haley's dog, who was being toted around in a floral collar by a bridesmaid, had a custom-placed card in a high chair near the front. And I had a sticky note. Something in me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like when a light bulb dies mid-flicker. I walked back to the entrance, where the gift table was piled with boxes and envelopes. Mine was sitting right on top, an ivory-colored box with a silk ribbon. Inside, a plain white envelope with a check for $50,000. I picked it up. No one noticed. Everyone was too busy clinking glasses and taking selfies under the Haley plus Mason Forever neon sign. I turned, walked back toward the main reception area, and stood near the edge of the dance floor. Then I said it. Calmly. Loud enough to carry, but not so loud that it sounded like a performance. Didn't realize a $50,000 check only bought me a spot next to the toilets. Everything stopped. The music didn't at first, but the energy in the room flatlined. People turned. Someone gasped. One of Haley's friends whispered something, eyes wide. And then I heard it, Mason, from behind the bar setup, whispering, "Wait, you're taking it back?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked out the front doors, past the valet, past the sign that said, "Love, Laughter, and Happily Ever After," and straight into the warm vineyard dusk. I could hear someone running behind me. It was Haley. Barefoot, breathless, wedding dress hiked just enough to reveal one mud-splattered heel. She came sprinting down the gravel path like she was chasing the end of a rom-com. Except there wasn't anything romantic about the look on her face. It wasn't love or heartbreak, it was panic. Not the kind of panic that comes from losing a sibling, but the kind that comes when a safety net snaps. "Leo," she called out. "Leo, stop. What are you doing?" I didn't stop. I didn't slow. I kept walking toward my car, my grip tight on the box, my heart pounding, but not from nerves. From something colder. Years of biting my tongue. Years of being the afterthought. The wallet. The fallback plan. She caught up right as I reached my door. Grabbed my arm. "Are you seriously going to ruin my wedding over a stupid seat?" I turned and stared at her. That dress cost more than a down payment. Her hair had been done by someone they flew in from LA. She was glowing in that filtered, Instagram-ready way she always aimed for. And she had the audacity to call my reaction ruining her big day. I raised an eyebrow. "A stupid seat?" She flinched, just a little, but held her ground. "You knew where they were putting me," I said, my voice low. "You knew, and you didn't stop it." She hesitated. "It's not like that." "No." I stepped forward. "Then tell me why the dog got a real seat and I didn't." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Tell me," I continued, "why the guy who helped you make that final venue payment is sitting next to a mop bucket while the DJ gets to sit with Grandma." "Leo, please," she whispered. "You're making a scene." That hit me harder than I expected. "You're making a scene." Not "I'm sorry," not "let's fix this," not "you're right." Just a tidy little accusation that I was the problem. "Yeah," I said, half laughing. "God forbid I mess up your curated fairy tale." She looked like she was going to cry, and for a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered something. 3 weeks ago, I asked her if I could bring a plus one. A girl I'd been seeing, someone I really liked. Haley's reply? "This wedding's kind of for family and VIPs. I'm trying to keep the vibe clean. You understand, right?" At the time, I let it slide. I didn't want to argue. But now? Now I saw the pattern. "I never mattered to you," I said. "Not really. I was useful. Until I wasn't." "That's not true," she said, finally snapping out of her shocked silence. "You're my brother, Leo. I love you." I tilted my head. "Then why does it feel like I'm only invited when there's a bill involved?" She didn't answer. Her lip quivered, but I could see the frustration simmering just beneath the surface. She wasn't sorry about me. She was sorry she might have to explain this to Mason. Or worse, to her photographer when the family shots were missing the guy who footed the tab for half the wedding. The silence between us stretched. I opened the car door, set the gift box on the passenger seat, and turned back to her one last time. "I was going to give this to you with a toast," I said. "Something sweet. Something honest. About how, even when we didn't get along, I still believed in you. I thought this day was about celebrating love. Turns out it was just about seating charts and appearances." "Leo, congratulations, Haley," I said, sliding into the car. "Hope your marriage has more respect than your guest list." I closed the door before she could say another word. As I drove down the gravel road, I glanced at the rearview mirror. She was still standing there in her wedding dress, surrounded by perfectly trimmed hedges and fairy lights, staring after me like she'd just realized something wasn't coming back. When I got back to the city, my phone was already lighting up. Missed call, Mom. Missed call, Dad. Text from Mason, "Dude. What happened?" Group chat. "Leo, where are you? Please don't do this right now." That last one made me laugh. Please don't do this. As if I had caused the problem. As if I was the one who stuck a sticky note on a folding chair and called it gratitude. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I poured a glass of scotch, sat on my balcony, and opened my laptop. Because what no one realized was that the check wasn't just money. It was a transaction. One with strings. See, The money had been going into a joint investment account I'd set up for Haley and Mason, one that wasn't technically theirs yet. It was structured to mature after a year. In the meantime, it was sitting pretty under my name in a brokerage that still required my approval for transfers. So no, I wasn't just taking back a check. I was pulling the rug out from under a fantasy they'd already budgeted for. And the fallout? Well, the fallout didn't come all at once. It rolled in slow, like a storm building over the course of days, each cloud darker than the last. At first, it was just the buzzing, the endless notifications, missed calls. Group chats that had previously been dead for months now suddenly exploded with life. Haley tried first. The morning after the wedding, I woke up to 12 missed calls and a voice message that started calm and teetered toward unhinged. "Leo, please just call me back. I didn't mean to make you feel unimportant. It was a stressful day. There were so many people and so much going on, and I didn't beep." Then came the follow-up. "Okay, I'm trying really hard here. You've made your point. You embarrassed me on my wedding day, and fine. I get it. But that money was promised, Leo. We signed agreements based on it. We can't just undo everything because of a stupid seat." That one made me pause. We signed agreements. They had already spent the money, which, of course, meant the house they were planning to close on next month. That was no longer happening. The honeymoon to Tuscany with the 5-star culinary experience? Already booked and non-refundable. That's the thing about fantasy weddings. They're often built on IOUs and assumptions, and in this case, one very specific assumption that I'd always come through. And to be fair, I usually did. But this time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt calm, controlled, for once. By Monday, the tone shifted. My parents called. My mom left a voicemail that was 47 seconds of shallow breathing, then a shaky, "Leo, I don't know what happened between you and your sister, but please, call her. Fix this. Fix this." That phrase hit me sideways. Like I was the leak, and my job was to patch things up. As if being humiliated publicly, then having my value reduced to a dollar amount, wasn't enough. Now I was expected to fix it? Then my dad texted, "This is petty. I don't know what she did, but weddings are chaotic. You should have just talked to her instead of pulling this stunt." Yes. The "you're overreacting" classic. The message wasn't new. I'd heard versions of it my whole life. When Haley got into screaming matches as a teen and slammed doors, my parents would say, "Let her cool off." When I brought up how she never once acknowledged my graduation, they said, "She's not great with dates. Don't take it personally." When she borrowed money and ghosted repayment plans, they said, "She's your sister." But me? I was expected to be mature, quiet, consistent, dependable, the invisible scaffold holding everything up. Never praised, never centered, but absolutely expected. That night, I got a message from Mason. "Hey man, I don't want to get in the middle of this, but Haley's a mess. And I mean, this isn't just about the money. This is about trust. You promised us that money. We signed a lease. We're under contract. Please don't let one seating chart ruin our future." I stared at it for a long time, and then I replied, "You didn't even notice I wasn't seated at a real table. Your future was never my responsibility." He didn't respond. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened to it. It was a man from the real estate agency handling Haley and Mason's new home. Apparently, they listed me as a silent guarantor. Without the funds hitting the account, their financing would fall through. They never even asked. That was the last thread I needed cut. I called the agency back, gave them a firm, professional, legally clear response. I was unaware my name was being used in that way. I revoke any verbal or assumed commitment. I will not be guaranteeing any part of this transaction. The agent was polite. "Understood, sir." And just like that, the dream house was gone. By Wednesday, Haley's calls had stopped. My family group chat went quiet, save for one cousin dropping a vague meme about snakes in the grass. Cute. Thursday morning, I opened Instagram. Haley had posted a photo from the wedding, her and Mason, framed under a floral arch, captioned with, "Even when people try to ruin your day, love wins." The comments were a mix of sympathy and confusion. A few mutual friends messaged me privately. "What happened? You good? Why is she being so shady?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the real fallout hadn't hit her yet. That came Friday. At 8:41 a.m., my phone rang. I recognized the number, my lawyer's office. I picked up. "Leo," my attorney said, calm and crisp. You asked me to freeze the account access earlier this week. That's been processed. But we just got a notice from Haley's financial advisor. She attempted to liquidate the investment early. We informed them she has no legal right to do so. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Good. There's more, he said. Apparently, she's now claiming the check was a promised gift. She wants to file a grievance. I laughed. Let her. Because here's the kicker. I never gave them the money. I wrote the check, yes, but it wasn't signed. Slipped into the box with a note. Let me know if you ever see me as more than just a wallet. Then we'll talk. They never opened the envelope. They just assumed. Assumed I'd roll over. Assumed I'd play my part. Assumed I wouldn't walk away. Now they were finding out what it meant when I did. But the real storm hadn't hit yet. That came the following week, when the wedding photographer sent out the full gallery, hundreds of shots posted publicly on the studio's page. And there I was. In none of them. Not a single photo. No candid smiles. No family portraits. No sibling shots. It was like I never existed. Until the comments started rolling in. Where's the brother? Didn't Haley have a brother? Wait, wasn't Leo the one who helped fund this venue? I heard a rumor about the gift. Can someone confirm? And then finally, one brave ant dropped the truth in the comments. He walked out. They stuck him by the bathrooms. Still can't believe they did that to him. The silence after that was deafening. She showed up 3 days later. No warning. No text. Just a sharp knock on my apartment door at noon, while I was halfway through reheating leftovers and watching a documentary about shipwrecks. I ignored the first knock, assuming it was a delivery. Then came the second, firmer, more deliberate. When I opened the door, there she was. Still Haley, but dimmed. No makeup. Hoodie over sweatpants. Her hair was pulled back into a bun that looked like it had been slept in, and her expression? It wasn't anger, or smugness, or even embarrassment. It was something I hadn't seen from her in years, maybe ever. Uncertainty. She looked up at me. Can I come in? I didn't move. She gestured to the hallway. I don't want to do this here. There was a long pause between us, filled with the kind of weight that only builds when the silence itself becomes another form of conversation. I finally stepped aside. She walked in slowly, as if she wasn't sure she'd still be welcome even after crossing the threshold. She sat on the edge of the couch like a guest in a stranger's home. I stayed standing. She rubbed her palms together, took a shaky breath, and said quietly, I messed up. I didn't respond. I let the silence do what it needed to. I didn't think, she continued, staring at the floor. I really didn't. I just got so wrapped up in everything. The venue, the seating charts, making sure everything looked perfect. And when I saw that there weren't enough spots at the head tables, I should have fixed it. But I didn't. I just figured you wouldn't care. I raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't care about being shoved by the toilets on your wedding day? She winced. I know. It sounds awful now. But at the time, I thought, Leo doesn't make a fuss. He never does. You've always been the one who just handles things. And that gave you permission to treat me like a coat rack? She flinched again, but nodded. I deserve that. There was another silence. Not as sharp as before, but still cutting. She looked up at me, eyes glassy now. Mason and I, we're in trouble. I said nothing. Let her sit in it. We already submitted the down payment forms. The contract's in escrow. And now the seller's threatening legal action if we can't come up with the rest of the money by the end of the week. And the honeymoon, well, we tried to cancel, but it was one of those no-refund package deals. And Mason's crypto got wiped out when the market crashed last month. And her voice cracked. I know this is my fault. I didn't even open the envelope. I just assumed. I thought it was there, and that you were just being dramatic. But then I opened it, and I saw the note. She paused, looked down at her lap. And that's when I realized you weren't being dramatic. You were being done. I leaned against the wall. You always assumed I'd just take it. No matter what. You took my help, my time, my money, and you never once stopped to ask what it cost me to keep giving it. Tears now. Silent, but steady. She didn't wipe them away. Just sat there, letting them fall. You're right, she whispered. I took you for granted. I didn't say anything. Let her sit with it. Finally, she looked up at me. So, what now? Are we just done? Forever. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I could tell it wasn't a performance. This wasn't her trying to guilt me or get something out of me. This was the moment she finally understood the weight of everything she'd thrown on me over the years. And part of me wanted to say yes. Wanted to close the door on her the same way she metaphorically closed the door on me that night, taped my name to it, and called it a seat. But another part of me, the one that still remembered her as the kid who cried when I scraped my knee in 3rd grade, who used to sneak Oreos from the pantry and split them with me in the dark, knew that this wasn't a moment for cruelty. This was a moment for consequence. No, I said quietly. We're not done forever. But we are done with how things used to be. She looked up, blinking back tears. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your wallet. I'm not your backup plan. If you want to be in my life, you have to treat me like someone who matters, not just someone who pays. She nodded quickly, like she was scared if she didn't agree fast enough. I'd take it all back again. And the money, she asked, so softly I almost missed it. I sighed, walked over to my desk and pulled the envelope out from the drawer. I held it up, then tore it in half. I was never going to give you a check, I said. I was going to set up a trust. Something long-term. Something responsible. But I needed to know you saw me. That you didn't just see what I could offer. She bit her lip, her face crumbling. So, that's it. No money. No quick fix, I said. But maybe, if you and Mason get your act together, and if you actually show up as a sister, not a user, maybe in a year, I'll help you start something. With you, not for you. She nodded slowly. She knew better than to push. When she left, she gave me a quiet hug. It wasn't dramatic. No promises of redemption. Just a quiet, heavy squeeze that carried more meaning than any speech she could have rehearsed. Weeks passed. Haley stopped posting wedding photos. The honeymoon never happened. The house deal collapsed. I heard they moved into a modest apartment downtown, with creaky floors and a shared laundry room. A far cry from the Instagram dream, but maybe exactly what they needed. We didn't talk much after that. Just the occasional text. A birthday card. A meme shared at 2 a.m. No more requests. No more guilt trips. Just 2 siblings, trying to figure out if there was a bridge left to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't holding the whole weight of that bridge alone. I had set it down. And I wasn't picking it back up again unless someone was willing to build from the other side. That was the ending I chose. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just free. I'm Jack. I'm 32 years old. And I guess you could say I've always been the easy kid. You know the type. Quiet, reliable, never caused a scene. Always made sure to pick up after himself. Didn't ask for much. Kept his grades up. Got a job early. Paid his way through college. And didn't complain when things weren't fair because what would be the point, right? That was me. Jack, the low-maintenance son. The one you could count on. But only when it was convenient. I used to think that was something to be proud of. Now I'm not so sure. I grew up in a pretty, picture-perfect family from the outside. 2 parents, 2 siblings, a well-manicured lawn, and matching Christmas pajamas every year for the annual photo that my mom would post with the caption, "Grateful beyond words, my mom." Sharon is the kind of woman who treats Instagram like a religion and appearances like gospel. My dad, Greg, mostly stayed out of the chaos, preferring his woodworking shed and ESPN to any real emotional involvement. He's the classic checked-out suburban dad, present but absent, if that makes sense. My older sister, Melanie, is 35 and has always been the center of attention. Blonde, bubbly, popular, the type to throw wine nights for her ladies and use phrases like, "I just feel like I'm vibing so hard this year." And then there's Ethan, my younger brother. He's 28, a bit of a golden boy in my mom's eyes, always making messes and getting praised for trying, even when he failed miserably. He bounced from job to job, hobby to hobby, and girlfriend to girlfriend, but Sharon always found a way to spin it as him finding himself. Meanwhile, I've been working quietly in the background for years, running a small but steadily growing tech consultancy that I built from scratch. I own my house outright. I pay my taxes. I don't throw tantrums or show up to family dinners drunk. You'd think that would count for something. But in my family? Not really. For as long as I can remember, Christmas has been Sharon's Olympics. She plans it with military precision starting in October, matching decor themes, color-coded gift wrap, themed menus, and of course, the great unwrapping, where each person opens their gifts one by one so Sharon can record our reactions. When we were kids, it was magical. When we were teens, it was tradition. As adults, it's more like a performative ritual where my mom plays director, audience, and star. And every year, I somehow manage to convince myself that this time will be different. That this time, she'll see me. Really see me. Not just as the reliable one or the quiet one, but as her son. As Jack. But Christmas of this past year? That was the year I finally snapped. It started like it always did. I arrived on the 23rd, just like I was asked. Not early, not late. Melanie was already there, lounging on the couch in a matching loungewear set, sipping something out of a glass that clinked with ice. She greeted me with an air kiss and a distracted, "Hey you," as if I was someone she vaguely remembered from high school. Ethan showed up an hour later with his latest girlfriend, a girl named Kelsey who wore oversized sunglasses indoors and spoke in TikTok catchphrases. Sharon had made up the guest rooms with monogrammed pillowcases for everyone but me. Mine just said guest. I noticed it right away, but didn't say anything. I never do. Dinner was tense in the way that only family dinners can be. Melanie talked about her upcoming trip to Tulum with her influencer friends. Ethan bragged about some crypto thing he was about to get rich off of, and I just sat there, nodding occasionally, sipping my wine, wondering how I always managed to feel like a visitor in my own family. At one point, Sharon turned to me and said, "Jack, you're so quiet. You really need to put yourself out there more. Learn to shine." I gave a tight smile. "I run my own company, Mom." She waved it off like I'd just told her I learned how to fold a fitted sheet. "Oh sure, your little tech thing. But I mean something real." Melanie snorted into her wine glass. Ethan laughed too loud. I excused myself early that night. Christmas morning arrived with its usual fanfare. Sharon made her famous cinnamon rolls. The fireplace roared, the tree lights twinkled, and the presents were piled high in color-coded stacks with hand-lettered tags and bows big enough to double as headwear. We went through the usual motions, Sharon directing, us acting. Melanie went first. She unwrapped a designer handbag, a spa weekend voucher, and then the big gift, a trip to Paris. First class, 5-star hotel. "Because you've been so stressed lately," Sharon beamed. Melanie squealed and cried and hugged Mom like she'd just been handed a kidney. Then it was Ethan's turn. He got a Rolex. "An actual Rolex," Sharon said. "I just felt like you needed something to remind you of your potential." Ethan, who has no job and once accidentally set his apartment on fire with a hot plate, grinned and slapped her a high five. Then it was my turn. I already knew not to expect much. I never did. But when I opened the gift bag with my name on it, noticeably smaller than everyone else's, I still felt that sting. Inside was a plastic-wrapped bundle of expired coupons. Local ones, mostly for places that had already gone out of business. A pizza joint that had shut down last spring. A 15% off card for a gym I'd never heard of. A few crumpled receipts at the bottom, as if the bag had been reused from a previous year. I stared at it for a second, wondering if it was some kind of joke. Then I looked up. Sharon was already moving on. "Well, Jack," she said, not even meeting my eyes, "you've never really been one for gifts. You're not exactly an effort kind of person." That sentence. That one stupid sentence. I don't know what happened inside me, but something snapped. Maybe it was the way she said it so casually. Maybe it was the way no one even blinked. Maybe it was just 20 years of swallowing the same bitter pill finally catching up to me. I let out a laugh. A genuine one. Not angry. Not sarcastic. Just empty. I set the gift bag down, stood up, and said, "Yeah, I guess not." Then I went to bed. But the next morning, when they all stumbled downstairs, probably expecting more cinnamon rolls and forced cheer, they were greeted with something else entirely. Silence. My car was gone. My room was empty. And out on the snow-dusted lawn, right where Dad's handmade reindeer decorations used to stand, was a big, bold for sale sign. And I hadn't just walked away from the house. I had walked away from everything. When I tell you they had no idea, I mean it. None of them saw it coming. For the first time in my life, I was the one who orchestrated the surprise, and I didn't do it for applause or recognition. I did it because I had finally reached a point where staying silent, staying the easy kid, was no longer an option. But before I get to that morning and everything that followed, I need to rewind just a bit, because the betrayal didn't start on Christmas. It just reached its boiling point that day. The truth is, it had been simmering for years, long enough to convince me that it wasn't just neglect or favoritism. It was something deeper, something crueler, and it had been carefully disguised as love. Let me back up to the summer before that Christmas. I'd just landed the biggest client of my career. A logistics company was switching over their entire back-end system, and my team, yes, my team of 12 engineers and designers, was brought in to lead the project. It meant long hours, a ton of stress, and a huge payout. When I finally signed the final contract, I told Sharon. Not because I needed a parade, but because I thought she might, I don't know, be happy for me. Maybe even say something maternal like, "I'm proud of you." She didn't. Her exact words were, "Oh, logistics? Like trucks? That doesn't sound very glamorous, but I'm glad you're staying busy." Melanie, meanwhile, had just opened an online boutique selling rebranded dropship jewelry at a 400% markup. Sharon threw a backyard launch party for her, complete with custom cupcakes and a photographer. Ethan had failed the real estate exam for the second time, and Sharon still posted a picture of him with the caption, "Proud of this guy for never giving up on his dreams." I commented with a simple, "Nice job," and Sharon deleted my comment. Said it ruined the aesthetic. But it didn't end there. My cousin Danny was getting married in October, and Sharon insisted the whole family attend. I flew in from Chicago, paid for my own hotel, and even upgraded Sharon's rental car when hers got downgraded last minute. Melanie and Ethan both arrived late, empty-handed, and still got praised for making the effort. I offered to help set up decorations and was handed a broom. At dinner, my name wasn't even on the family seating chart. I ended up sitting next to the DJ, who was the only person all night to ask me what I did for a living. After the wedding, I tried, one last time, to have a real conversation with Sharon. We were alone, sitting on her porch, the sun setting behind the hedges she always kept obsessively trimmed. I asked her, gently, why it always felt like I was the odd one out. Why she never really seemed to care about what I was doing. She sipped her wine and said, "You were always so independent, Jack. You never needed us the way your siblings did. You made it clear you didn't want to be part of all this." All this. As if all this was something sacred and I had voluntarily stepped outside the circle. As if her refusal to include me was my choice. I nodded and said, "Okay." But inside, something shifted. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was done. Then came December. 2 weeks before Christmas, I told Sharon I'd be bringing someone with me to dinner. Her name was Ava. We weren't serious, but we had been seeing each other for a couple of months, and I thought it would be nice to have someone in my corner for once. Sharon's reply? "Oh well, that's short notice. Are you sure she'll feel comfortable? We have a vibe we like to keep." Keep in mind, this is the same woman who let Ethan bring a different girl every single Christmas since college. Some of them didn't even stay the night. One time, his date left halfway through dinner to go to a bar and never came back. But my bringing Ava was an inconvenience. I told Sharon not to worry. We'd stay in a hotel. She didn't respond. On Christmas Eve, Ava and I arrived right on time. Melanie and Ethan were already there, as expected. Sharon greeted Ava with a frozen smile and a once-over that made her cheeks flush. During dinner, every question Sharon asked was directed at Melanie or Ethan. Every time Ava tried to speak, Sharon would cut her off or redirect the conversation. Ethan made a joke about my job being something with routers and wires, and Sharon laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. I looked over at Ava. She gave me a tight smile. Later, she whispered, "Is it always like this?" And I said, "Worse." We left early that night and sat in the car outside the hotel for a while. Ava was quiet. I could tell she was trying to find the right words. Eventually, she said, "I think your mom actually resents you." I didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. Christmas morning unfolded the way I already told you. The trip to Paris, the Rolex, the expired coupons, and that single sentence that broke me. Well, you never really put in the effort. Effort. Let me tell you something about effort. I'd been putting in effort since I was 13 years old, helping Dad fix the leaky garage roof because Ethan didn't want to miss his soccer tryout. I put in effort when I skipped prom to work a double shift at the diner so I could save for college. I put in effort every time I sent flowers on Mother's Day, even when I knew she'd post Melanie's brunch instead. I put in effort when I helped Dad build that deck last summer in 90-degree heat while Ethan sat inside playing Xbox. Effort was the only reason I'd made it out of that house with my sanity intact. So after they left, after Sharon dismissed me like a ghost, I went to bed, and Ava followed, holding my hand in that quiet way that says everything without a word. We didn't sleep much. Instead, I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every slight, every insult, every overlooked moment. I realized something that night. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn a seat at a table that was never set for me. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to flip the table over instead. Before dawn, I got up. Ava stirred, but I told her to go back to sleep. I slipped out of the hotel room and drove back to the house, moving like a ghost through the darkened streets. I parked a block away so they wouldn't hear. Let myself in with the spare key they still hadn't changed. The living room was a mess of wrapping paper and half-empty wine glasses. I stepped over a fallen stocking and went straight to the closet. Inside was the deed. See, what Sharon didn't know, what no one in that house knew, was that 6 months prior, Dad had quietly transferred the ownership of the house to me. It wasn't out of guilt. It wasn't even out of love. It was out of practicality. He'd fallen behind on a second mortgage. The house was nearly in default. I paid it off. Every cent. In exchange, he signed it over. Sharon never found out, because he knew she'd never allow it. He told her some lie about refinancing. She didn't ask questions. She never did when money was involved. I told him I'd hold on to it until the time was right. And Christmas morning felt like exactly the right time. I called the real estate agent on my drive back to the hotel. I didn't hesitate. I told him to list it immediately. And then I texted my lawyer. That was what they woke up to. The house empty. My room stripped of everything I had ever left behind. A for sale sign on the front lawn, staked deep into the frozen grass like a flag on conquered land. But I wasn't done yet. Because one betrayal was still waiting. One final twist that would make everything crystal clear. And that was when the letter arrived. For the first few days after I left, I didn't hear a word. No texts. No missed calls. No where are you messages. Just silence. It was almost funny, in a bitter way. After everything I'd done, after everything I was to that family, my sudden disappearance didn't even register. Or maybe it did, and they just didn't know how to react. Maybe Sharon was too stunned, too proud, to herself to reach out. Or maybe, deep down, she didn't think I was worth chasing. But I knew the silence wouldn't last. I'd lit too big a fire for them to ignore forever. The real storm hit on the 4th day, just after New Year's. I was in my apartment in Chicago, sitting at my desk, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Ava had gone back to her place the night before, needing some time to decompress from the whole holiday circus. We weren't broken up or anything, just paused. That was the word she used. Paused. She said she needed to understand how I handled pain before she could commit to something deeper. I didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. I was sipping my coffee when the first call came in. Melanie. I didn't pick up. Then Ethan. I let it ring. And then Sharon. Voicemail. Jack. This isn't funny. Your brother and sister are devastated. Your father is furious. I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but this is not how family behaves. We need to talk. Call me. That was it. No, are you okay? No apology. No effort to understand. Just a demand and an accusation. I blocked the number. By the end of that week, the texts started rolling in from extended family. Cousins. Aunts. People I hadn't spoken to in years. All versions of the same script. Your mom is heartbroken. This is too much, even for you. You can't sell their house, Jack. As if I'd pulled the rug out from under a pair of innocent retirees instead of reclaiming the one damn thing I'd ever been allowed to control. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I moved. I took the boxes I'd been packing and signed a lease on a small brick townhouse not far from the river. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms. Big windows. A crooked little staircase. But it was mine, and more importantly, it felt like me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was apologizing just by existing. Those first few weeks were hard, though. I'm not going to pretend I bounced back overnight. I felt like I was floating in limbo, half ashamed, half relieved, all jumbled up into this fog of emotions I didn't know how to sort through. I kept questioning myself. Had I overreacted? Was it really that bad? Was I just too sensitive? But then I'd remember Christmas morning. That bag. That sentence. And how they laughed. That would clear the fog pretty fast. Work helped. I threw myself into the business. Took on more clients. Hired 2 new developers. We moved into a small office space downtown. Just a second-floor walk-up with bad lighting and good energy. The kind of place where you could build something that mattered. And slowly, quietly, things started clicking into place. I'd wake up early, run by the river, make myself breakfast, check my inbox. I bought plants. I hung art. I made my space a home. On weekends, I'd go to this indie bookstore near Logan Square where they hosted live readings, and I started journaling. At first, it felt dumb. I'd sit there with this leather-bound notebook, staring at the page like it owed me something. But then the words started to come. Memories. Thoughts. Little moments I hadn't realized were still clinging to me like vines. Like the time I broke my arm in 6th grade and Sharon made me walk home because she thought I was faking it to skip gym. Or when I got into my first choice college and the only thing she said was, "Well, don't get cocky. A lot of people drop out." Or the time I offered to pay for Thanksgiving dinner and she told me, "That's sweet, Jack, but we'll let your brother handle it. He needs the confidence boost." I wrote it all down. Every crack, every bruise, every subtle dismissal that had shaped the way I saw myself. And then one day, about 2 months after I left, something strange happened. I was sitting in the office, going over budgets, when my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. "Sharon Forrester has endorsed you for team management." I stared at the screen for a full minute, then laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was so on brand. My mother couldn't be bothered to call me and ask if I was okay, but she could log on to LinkedIn and click a button that said I was good at managing people. I didn't click back. But that night, I wrote about it in my journal. My mother has always given compliments like breadcrumbs in a forest, just enough to make you think you're not lost, but never enough to get you home. And with that, I turned the page. Literally and metaphorically. March came, and with it, a blizzard of legal documents. Sharon and Greg had finally realized I wasn't bluffing. The house was listed. Offers were coming in. My lawyer, Jessica, a woman I met through a business connection and quickly came to respect, handled most of the logistics. But one day, she called me with a strange tone in her voice. "I got a package today," she said. "Addressed to you. From your mother." She paused. "Do you want it forwarded?" I told her yes. It arrived 2 days later. A manila envelope, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Inside was a letter. Not typed. Not neat. Just scrawled ink on torn notebook paper. Sharon's voice in every word. "Jack, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but you've made your point. You've embarrassed this family. You've hurt your siblings. Your father doesn't even know what to say to you anymore. You always acted like you were above us, and now I see that was true. But don't forget who raised you. Don't forget who fed you, who gave you a roof, who bought your first suit, who drove you to job interviews before you had a car. Maybe I wasn't perfect, but I did my best. And this is how you repay me? You want to be alone? Fine, be alone. Just don't come back when you realize what you've lost. No apology, no accountability, just one last twist of the knife." I put the letter in a drawer, not to save it, just to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. That was the rock bottom, I think. Not the silence, not the anger, not even the loneliness. It was the confirmation that my mother, the woman I'd spent decades trying to impress, was never going to change. Not for me, not for anyone. But rock bottom has its perks. There's nowhere left to fall. Spring came, and with it, a surprising shift. I started going to therapy. Ava encouraged me, though we still hadn't fully reconnected. She was cautious, but kind. She'd check in now and then, asking how I was doing. I never lied. I told her it was hard, but I was working on it. My therapist, Dr. Martin, was a quiet woman with silver hair and a collection of owl-shaped mugs. She didn't talk much at first, just asked questions that cut deeper than I expected. What did you want your mother to say when you showed her your business plan? What did her approval mean to you? Who are you trying to become, and who are you still trying to prove wrong? I'd sit in that office once a week, peeling back layers I didn't know I had. Shame, guilt, this strange sense that I was only valuable when I was useful. That love had to be earned, over and over again, like some twisted subscription service. But slowly, with each session, the weight started to lift. Not all at once, but piece by piece. I started saying no more often, started prioritizing rest, started setting boundaries. And the more I did, the more I realized how much of my life I'd spent trying to be someone else's idea of good. I stopped doing that. I became my own. By May, the house was sold. I didn't go back to clean it out. I hired a service. I sent Sharon and Greg the final paperwork through the lawyer. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't know them that. But I did keep one thing. A photo. Me, age 9, holding a science fair trophy in front of the fireplace. No one else in the picture. Just me, smiling like I'd finally been seen. I framed it and put it on my new bookshelf, right next to the plant Ava bought me before Christmas. She came over again in June. We talked for hours. This time, there was no pause. There was just us. And there was peace. But the past has a funny way of showing up just when you think you've escaped it. Because a few weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't recognize the voice at first. Jack? It's Dad. He sounded tired. Older. Like something had cracked. I need to talk to you, he said. It's about your sister. And just like that, the past came knocking. I hadn't heard my dad's voice in months. Not since the blurry chaos of Christmas. When I saw unknown caller flash across the screen, I almost let it ring out of habit. But something stopped me. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the soft thrum of closure that had started to form inside me after all those months away. Whatever it was, I picked up. And for the first 5 seconds, neither of us spoke. Then, Jack? It's Dad. His voice didn't sound like I remembered it. Greg Forrester was never an expressive man, stoic, measured, the kind of guy who sat at the dinner table with a fork in one hand and a newspaper in the other. But there was something cracked in his tone now. A hollowness, like the foundation had finally buckled under the weight of years of pretending. I need to talk to you, he said. It's about your sister. I didn't say anything right away. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part, maybe the part that still carried that boyish sliver of hope, stayed on the line. She's in trouble, Jack, he said. Real trouble. I took a breath, leaning against the cool window of my office. What kind of trouble? She took money, he said. From your mother. From me. I blinked. What do you mean took money? He sighed. She told us she was investing it. Said it was part of her boutique expansion, something about influencers and ad budgets. Your mother gave her full access to the joint account. And now it's all gone. I closed my eyes. Of course. How much? Greg hesitated. Nearly 70,000. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The silence was its own kind of confirmation. She used it to buy followers, fake reviews. Paid some consultant who vanished. The boutique is dead. She didn't even renew the website domain. And now your mother's in a panic because the mortgage for their new condo in Florida just fell through and, well, I think she's starting to realize that the house was the only real safety net we had. So now she wants to talk? I said, now that Melanie turned out to be a bad investment? She doesn't know I'm calling, he said quietly. That surprised me. I'm not asking you to fix this, he added. I just thought you should know. I didn't answer. I could feel my chest tightening. Not with panic. With purpose. There's a moment when you've been underestimated your entire life, where something inside you clicks. Not out of rage. Not out of spite. But out of clarity. You see the whole board for the first time. You realize how the pieces were always arranged against you. And how, if you move carefully, you can flip the entire game on its head. That moment had arrived. I hung up without promising anything. But I spent the next 2 hours staring at the wall, connecting dots in my mind. The house was gone. The safety net was gone. Melanie had burned through every dollar like it was Monopoly money. And now the cracks were too big to paint over. The family was exposed. And me? I had resources. Knowledge. Leverage. All I needed was the right moment and a plan. The next day, I called Ava. You busy? I asked. Depends, she said. Are we talking emotionally or logistically? Both, I said. But I need a partner. There was a pause. For what? Something surgical. Ava laughed softly. That's your way of saying revenge, isn't it? I didn't deny it. We met that night at her apartment. She had Thai food waiting and a whiteboard pulled out of her closet like we were planning a heist. Which, in a way, we were. Okay, she said, wiping her hands. Walk me through it. I told her everything. The call from Greg. The money. The boutique collapse. The condo fallout. Sharon's silence. Melanie's mess. I even showed her the letter, the one Sharon had scrawled in anger, still tucked in my drawer like a relic from a dead religion. Ava took it all in, nodding slowly. So what do you want to do? She asked. I want to make them face it, I said. Not just the financial part. The real part. The rot. The favoritism. The manipulation. I want them to feel what it's like to be on the outside for once. I want to take away the illusion. Ava leaned back, folding her arms. That's a lot of therapy undone in one sentence. I smiled. I'm not doing it out of spite. She raised an eyebrow. Well, not just spite, I clarified. We started building the blueprint that night. And it wasn't about hacking bank accounts or sabotaging lives. That wasn't my style. My plan was quieter, smarter, more permanent. Step 1, gather allies. Over the years, I'd stayed in touch with a few cousins and extended relatives who had also felt the sting of Sharon's favoritism. Danny, the one who got married last fall, was first on my list. She'd once confided in me at her reception that Sharon had tried to convince her parents not to let me give a toast because I was too serious and might ruin the vibe. I texted Danny, "Want to help me expose a family lie?" Her reply came 2 minutes later. "I've been waiting for this moment my entire life." Step 2. The engagement party. That was the key. Melanie and her newest boyfriend, some dentist named Bryce, were planning an engagement party in early July. Sharon was already bragging about it on social media. Save the date. Hashtag future Mrs. Bright Smile, or some equally obnoxious hashtag. The guest list included distant relatives, high school friends, and a few local influencers Melanie had bribed into showing up. The party was to be held at a rented event space just outside the city. Classy, trendy, way above their current budget, which meant Sharon was probably covering it in the hopes of squeezing sympathy and maybe a bailout out of the relatives who hadn't yet heard about the boutique disaster. Perfect. Step 3. The slideshow. Ava came up with that part. We decided that if we were going to reveal the truth, we'd do it the way Sharon loved best, through a perfectly choreographed, photo-filled, emotionally manipulative presentation. Only ours would be different. We started collecting receipts, screenshots, public bankruptcy filings under Melanie's LLC, Yelp reviews from angry customers, emails forwarded from the consultant Melanie had hired, a ghost email address registered just 2 weeks before the collapse. Danny sent over old family group chats where Sharon praised Melanie for leading the next generation of women in business and dismissed my work as tech stuff for introverts. We compiled it all, organized it into a timeline. Ava handled the design, slick, minimal, devastating. The final slide? A screenshot of the overdraft joint account. Balance, minus $212.37. Captioned, "This is what favoritism buys." Step 4. The delivery. I RSVP'd to the engagement party with a +1. Ava. We showed up fashionably late, dressed to kill, carrying nothing but a flash drive and a very calm demeanor. Sharon looked surprised to see me. Melanie looked irritated. Ethan, who had apparently found God or Bitcoin or both in the past few months, looked like he wanted to disappear. "Jack," Sharon said, air-kissing me. "Didn't think you'd make it." "I figured it was time to reconnect," I said. "Besides, I brought a little something." I handed her the flash drive. She blinked. "What's this?" "A gift," I said. Ava smiled behind me. "It's a surprise." Sharon hesitated. Then, seeing people watching, she smiled too. "All right," she said. "Let's plug it in." The projector was already set up. The lights were dimmed. The crowd quieted. Sharon walked up to the mic, clinking her champagne glass. "Before we continue with the speeches, my firstborn has a little something to share." The word landed with its usual sting. But this time, I smiled. The slideshow began. The first few slides were normal. Childhood photos. Melanie in ballet. Melanie in braces. Melanie holding a fake diploma at her boutique launch party. Then came the shift. Bank transfers. Empty storefronts. Emails. Receipts. Voicemails from creditors. And finally, the overdraft screen. Silence. You could hear a fork drop. Literally. Someone dropped one. Melanie turned red, then white. Sharon's face froze. Greg, standing off to the side, closed his eyes. And me? I just watched. Not with cruelty. With closure. But the night wasn't over. Because just as Sharon lunged toward the laptop to pull the plug, a second folder appeared on screen. Labeled, Inheritance. And that was the part they never saw coming. The moment that second folder popped up, labeled Inheritance, you could feel the entire room seize up like a pulled muscle. It was just one word, tucked in the corner of the screen in Ava's clean white font, but it echoed across the room like thunder. Sharon's hand froze halfway to the laptop, her acrylic nails hovering over the keyboard. Her eyes snapped to mine, wide and sharp, filled with something between panic and rage. "Jack," she said, "don't you dare." But I already had. Ava, bless her, cool as ever, clicked the folder open from the remote she had tucked in her blazer pocket. The first document was a scanned PDF of the updated will. My grandfather's will. The real one. The one Sharon had quietly tried to rewrite over a decade ago. See, there's a little piece of history I haven't told you. My grandfather, Sharon's father, was one of the few people in my family who saw me. Really saw me. He'd been a quiet, brilliant man with a dry sense of humor and a habit of listening more than he spoke. I used to spend summers helping him in his garage workshop, handing him tools while he taught me how to fix things without rushing. He loved me in a way Sharon never could, with presence, not performance. When he passed away during my senior year of college, the will reading was short, simple, and suspiciously convenient. Sharon told us he'd left the house to her, a small trust to Ethan for growth, and a string of heirlooms to Melanie for future generations. I got a watch. A very old, very broken watch. No bank account. No mention of the summers we spent. Just a silent pat on the back and a ride back to school. But a year ago, while I was visiting an old storage unit where my grandfather used to keep his books and tools, I found something wedged in a manila envelope taped to the underside of an antique desk drawer. It was dated 6 months before his death, notarized and witnessed, a signed amendment to the will. One that named me as the sole beneficiary of his estate, including his house, his stocks, and a sizable amount stashed in a savings account I hadn't known existed. Sharon had, for whatever reason, never found this copy. I could have taken it to court then and there. But I didn't. Not yet. Not until now. Slide by slide, Ava brought it all into view. The hidden amendment, the notarization, the evidence that Sharon had filed a different version just weeks after he died. A version with a signature that, under closer inspection and a hired forensic handwriting analyst, didn't quite match. Not enough to land her in prison, but enough to cast a long, damning shadow. Enough to rattle bones. Enough to humiliate. Gasps rippled through the room. Whispers. Greg went ghost white. Ethan looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. Melanie started crying. Sharon, though, she tried to keep it together. Her voice rose, shaking but sharp. That's enough. That document is fake. My father never would have. Would have what? I said, stepping forward. Left something to the only person who didn't treat him like a stepping stone? The only one who didn't ask for money every time we visited. You don't understand how this family works, Jack, she snapped, her voice rising above the murmurs. You're not part of this. You never were. You never tried. You think a slideshow full of old receipts and dusty PDFs is going to change anything? This family isn't built on paperwork. It's built on loyalty, on history. And you walked out. I didn't walk out, I said, my voice quiet but clear. You pushed me out. And now? Now I'm just choosing to stay out on my own terms. I could have dropped the mic then and there. But I wasn't done. Because here's the thing about Sharon. Her greatest weapon was control. Control over perception, over emotion, over the carefully curated image she showed the world. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the real punishment wasn't the loss of money or property or even respect. It was exposure. Public, undeniable exposure. So I did one last thing. I handed the mic to Ava. She cleared her throat, smiled at the confused and stunned crowd, and said, For those of you wondering what this was all about, don't worry. We've uploaded the full presentation to a private link. You'll find it in your emails. It'll stay active for 48 hours. And then we left. We didn't wait for the reactions. We didn't stay for the spin. I didn't know them my time, and I certainly didn't know them my presence. I took Ava's hand and walked out the front doors of that overpriced, rented event space into the cool evening air. It felt like stepping out of a heavy coat I'd been wearing my whole life. The fallout came fast. 3 days later, I got a voicemail from Greg. Just Greg. No Sharon. Jack, I just wanted to say you were right. About everything. I don't know if it matters, but I'm sorry. I should have stepped in a long time ago. I should have seen it. I don't expect you to call back. Just take care of yourself. I didn't return the call, but I saved the message. Ethan messaged me too. A clumsy apology, buried under crypto quotes and thin attempts at self-deprecating humor. I left him on read. Melanie disappeared from social media for a month. When she came back, the engagement was off. Bryce had apparently dipped the night of the slideshow. Probably couldn't handle the truth. Or maybe he realized the woman he was marrying wasn't the person she pretended to be. Her boutique account was deactivated. The fake followers wiped out. Her personal page, once flooded with hashtags and humble brags, was now eerily quiet. As for Sharon, she didn't call. She didn't write. But I heard from Danny, who heard from Annalise, that Sharon and Greg sold the Florida condo before they even moved in. Downsized. Word was Sharon tried to spin it as embracing minimalism. But the family knew. The whispers had begun. She'd lost the narrative. And she hated that more than anything. Meanwhile, I lived. I breathed. I thrived. The business hit a new milestone that summer. We expanded to 2 new cities, onboard our biggest corporate client yet. I took a trip to Lisbon with Ava. No emails, no phones, just sunlight, street music, and lazy dinners by the water. We laughed like kids. We talked like adults. And somewhere between the cobblestone alleys and rooftop cafes, she said she wanted to build a life with me. Not because I had something to prove, but because I didn't anymore. In the fall, I got an invitation to Thanksgiving. Not from Sharon. From Danny. "We're doing something new this year," she said. "Small dinner. Real people. You in." I brought Ava. I brought wine. I brought peace. We ate. We laughed. We shared stories. No one interrupted. No one rolled their eyes. No one said, "You're being too serious." For the first time in my life, I felt like I was home, not because of blood, but because of belonging. At one point, Danny raised a glass and said, "To Jack, for teaching us all that you don't have to burn down your life to be free. Sometimes, you just have to stop building on top of someone else's lies." There were tears. Good ones. Later that night, as Ava and I walked back to the car under the streetlights, she looked at me and said, "You know, you never really got revenge." I stopped. "No," I said, smiling. "What would you call that?" She shook her head. "That wasn't revenge. That was liberation." And maybe she was right. Because revenge is about getting even. But what I did, that was about getting out. And for the first time in my life, I was finally free. Hey everyone, I really need to vent about something that happened to me this Thanksgiving. Honestly, I'm still processing it, but I wanted to share it because I just don't get how people can be this blatantly hypocritical. You all are probably going to be as angry as I was. So a little backstory. I'm Sarah, 33, and I have a son named Charlie. For the most part, I get along with my parents, but if you've been following my posts, you know there's a lot of tension between me and my sister, Emily. She's always been the golden child, perfect in my parents' eyes, and if you ask them, they'll swear that she's the better daughter. So, I've learned to just accept it. Or at least, I thought I had. When Thanksgiving rolled around this year, my parents called me up and invited me over, but they were very clear about one thing. No kids this year, Sarah. We're keeping it quiet this time. It's going to be an adult dinner. At first, I was kind of bummed about it, but then I thought, okay, maybe this will be nice. A peaceful dinner without the chaos of kids running around. I've been looking forward to some adult time for once, and I figured I'd just leave Charlie with my babysitter for a few hours. It would be a short trip. I'd go, hang out, and then come back home before he got lonely. I made sure to call my mom the night before and double-check the plans. Just confirming, "You're sure it's just going to be the adults, right?" I asked, even though I kind of already knew the answer. "Oh yes, Sarah. We want a nice, quiet Thanksgiving. No kids running around causing noise," she assured me. With that, I thought everything was settled. I left the house the next day, ready to spend a few hours with my family, and then head back to my son. It was going to be a quick, easy trip, or so I thought. When I got to my parents' house, it looked just like I remembered. Everything was set up for dinner. The house smelled amazing, and it had that holiday warmth. I figured I'd have a couple of hours of peace with them, maybe even get some one-on-one time with my mom. But as I walked in, something immediately felt off. The first thing I noticed was the noise. I wasn't expecting the sound of kids' laughter and footsteps pounding across the floor. I stood frozen for a second, blinking in disbelief. I heard a voice call out, "Aunt Sarah? Aunt Sarah?" and looked over to see Emily's kids, 3 of them, all running in and out of the kitchen, chasing each other, playing tag, making noise, just like the chaos my parents had said they didn't want. I froze. Wait, what? I thought I was hallucinating for a second, but no, there they were, Emily's kids. Confused and slightly annoyed, I turned around to look at my mom, who was standing at the stove, stirring the gravy like she didn't have a care in the world. "Mom," I said, trying to stay calm. "You said no kids this year." She turned to me with a smile that didn't match the situation. "Oh, honey, we did say no kids, but Emily's kids are here, and they're different. You know how it is with your son." I could feel my heart racing. Different? What did that even mean? "Mom," I said, raising my voice slightly. "You told me it was going to be a quiet dinner. No kids running around because they're too loud. But this is exactly what you said you didn't want." My mom looked up at me, giving me that look she always gives when she doesn't want to have an uncomfortable conversation. "Well, Your sister's kids are well-behaved, Sarah. They're quieter. I could feel my face flush. They're quieter? This was a straight-up slap in the face. I looked over at Emily, who was standing near the table with a smug smile, clearly enjoying the scene. It's not a big deal, Sarah. Mom just wants a calm dinner with family. And you know, my kids know how to act. Act. My son is well-behaved. He's not perfect, but he's definitely not a problem. Yet somehow, I was the one being excluded, my child deemed too loud for the Thanksgiving table, while Emily's kids could run around causing a racket. I could feel the tears welling up. I was angry, but I didn't want to break down right there, not in front of all of them. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking. I'm sorry, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. But I can't do this. I turned on my heel and walked straight out the door without looking back. I didn't even wait for my mom to call after me or for Emily to say anything else. I just left. I drove home in silence, my mind racing, my heart heavy with anger and hurt. I had been treated like I wasn't even part of the family, like my son didn't matter, like we were less than. I wanted to tell my parents exactly how I felt, to yell and scream at them, but what would be the point? I already knew where I stood with them. I wasn't going to get through to them. I wasn't going to change anything. 2 days passed. I thought that maybe the holidays would just blow over, that maybe I'd just let it go and move on. But then, this morning, the text started. First, it was my dad. He asked me how I was doing, said that he and Mom really missed me, and that they were sorry for the way things went. But the words didn't feel real. I could tell they were trying to smooth things over, but something felt fake about it. Then came the text from Emily. She was asking if I could help them out with some bills. Apparently, they were a little tight this month, and she was asking for a loan, saying it'd only be temporary. I stared at the screen in disbelief. After everything, after they'd treated me like nothing, after excluding me from the family dinner because of a stupid reason, they had the nerve to ask me for money? I was shaking with anger. And yet, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wouldn't let them manipulate me. Not again. Not ever again. I sat there staring at the text for a long time, letting the anger slowly build. How could they? After all that had happened, after the blatant hypocrisy of the Thanksgiving dinner, they had the gall to come to me for money? I felt like I was drowning in frustration. They'd made me feel small, dismissed my son and me, and now they wanted me to come to their rescue when things weren't going their way. How convenient. I wasn't about to be the fixer anymore, the one who always cleaned up everyone else's mess while they treated me like an afterthought. So, I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over my phone. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to let this slide. I began typing. Emily, I saw your message. I know things are tough, but I can't help you out this time. You made it clear that my son wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving, and I've got no interest in being treated like an outsider anymore. I've helped you guys enough, and you've taken advantage of my kindness for too long. I'm done. I stared at it for a second before hitting send. My heart pounded in my chest, but I knew this was the only response that made sense. There was no way I could keep enabling their behavior. I wasn't their bank, their emotional punching bag, or their doormat anymore. The reply came almost immediately. Sarah, please don't be like this. You're family. I didn't mean it like that. I was just asking for a little help. We've always helped you, right? We've always been there for you when you needed us. I could feel my blood boil again. They've always helped me? When? I couldn't remember a single time my parents or Emily had actually had my back. Sure, they'd made an effort every now and then, but it was always on their terms, always when they wanted to look good. I could see right through the manipulation. Emily was trying to guilt trip me, trying to get me to feel bad for standing up for myself. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. Not this time. I took a moment to breathe, then typed back. You've never been there for me, Emily. Not when it counted. You don't get to use me when it's convenient for you. If you need to figure things out, you'll have to do it on your own. I won't be part of this toxic cycle anymore. I hit send, feeling a strange mix of relief and frustration. I knew that what I had just said would likely stir up a storm. It wasn't going to be easy, but I couldn't keep letting them walk all over me. And then, like clockwork, my phone started blowing up. First, it was my dad again, asking me to consider the family and think of how things used to be. Then, it was a call from my mom. I didn't pick up at first, my hands were shaking too much. But she didn't stop. The phone rang again and again. Finally, I answered. Sarah, why are you being like this? Your father and I are upset. We've always been here for you, my mom said, her voice softer than I expected. Really? You've always been here for me? I replied, feeling the anger in my voice rising again. You told me my son wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving, and you still haven't apologized for it. You treat me like I'm not part of the family, but you want me to bail you out when things are tough? It doesn't work like that. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear my mom sigh, a sound I knew all too well. It was the sound of dismissal. Sarah, it's not like that. You've always been a bit dramatic, she started, but I wasn't having any of it. No, I interrupted. You don't get to call me dramatic after what you did. You told me my kid was too loud. That's what this is about. I've been your daughter for years, and this is how you treat me? You don't get to act like nothing happened and expect me to just let it go. I could hear my mom's voice cracking as she tried to smooth things over. Please, we're sorry. We just didn't want it to be too loud. I laughed bitterly. You didn't want it to be too loud? But Emily's kids can run around and scream, and that's fine. You're so full of it. I could feel the tears threatening to fall again, but I fought them back. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into feeling guilty. Look, Mom, I'm done. I've had enough. I'm not your fallback anymore. I'm not your plan B for when things go wrong. Don't call me again unless you're ready to apologize. Really apologize. The line went quiet for a few seconds, and then my mom sighed again, almost as if she was trying to let me off easy. We'll talk later, okay? Yeah, we'll see, I muttered, hanging up the phone. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went to bed feeling angry, betrayed, and exhausted. My phone was silent after the call with my mom, but I could tell it was only a matter of time before they tried again. They always did. It wasn't just the Thanksgiving thing that hurt. It was everything leading up to it. The way they'd always made me feel like I was second-rate compared to Emily. The way they'd put her on a pedestal while I was expected to just swallow my pride and play along. I was sick of it. And then came the next message, this time from Emily again. Sarah, we really need your help. Things are getting bad, and we don't have anyone else to turn to. Please, just this once. I swear I'll make it up to you. I sat there for what felt like forever, staring at the text on my phone. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing on me, like the air in the room had thickened. Every part of me wanted to say no, to shut them out for good and walk away. But then there was this tiny voice, whispering at the back of my mind, their family. They'll change. They need you. But no, I quickly reminded myself. They hadn't changed. Not really. They'd apologized for their actions, but it was always about saving face, never about truly acknowledging what they had done. I had let them walk all over me for so long because I was afraid of pushing them away completely. But this time felt different. I put my phone down on the table and leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. I was so tired of the emotional games, of the guilt trips, of being the one who always gave in. My son was my priority, and he deserved a mother who stood up for herself. He deserved to see that you didn't have to bend over backward for people who didn't respect you. I closed my eyes for a second and thought about how my parents had treated me for years. How they'd given Emily everything, praised her for every little thing she did, while I was left to deal with their leftovers. I wasn't just the black sheep in the family. I was the one who had to fight for the scraps. My phone buzzed again. I almost didn't want to look. But curiosity got the best of me, and I picked it up. It was another message from Emily. Sarah, please. I'm really sorry for how things went down. You know I didn't mean to hurt you, right? Things have been hard lately. The kids, the house, everything. I'm trying, but I don't know what to do. I need you. We need you. Please. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was trying to guilt trip me again. Trying to make me feel like I was the one abandoning her when she was the one who'd turned her back on me all these years. We need you. How many times had I heard that before? Only to be left out in the cold when it was time to step up. But this time, I wasn't falling for it. I had to put my foot down, and I had to stay firm. For myself. For my son. I took a deep breath and typed my response. I'm sorry, Emily, but I'm not going to keep enabling this. You've made it clear that I'm not welcome when things aren't going your way. I've helped you before, but I'm done now. I've got to take care of my own, and that doesn't include being the one you turn to when you need something. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them. I hit send without looking back. It felt liberating and terrifying. I knew this was the breaking point. This was the moment that could change everything. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was my mom this time. Sarah, what's going on? Why are you shutting us out? We're family, and we've always helped you, even when you didn't ask. Don't do this. I stared at the message for a while, letting the words sink in. We've always helped you. Again, the same old story. I'd heard it so many times that it barely even registered anymore. They always acted like I owed them something, like they'd done so much for me when in reality, it was the bare minimum. I took a breath and dialed my mom's number. I wasn't going to keep going back and forth with texts. I needed to hear her voice one last time, hear how she would try to manipulate me into giving in. When she picked up, there was a calmness to her voice, but I could tell she was starting to get frustrated. "Sarah, please. I don't know why you're doing this. We've always been there for you. We're your family." "Always been there for me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You haven't been there for me. You've been there for Emily. You've always put her first, and you've made me feel like I was just some backup. Well, I'm done. I'm done being the second choice. I'm done being your safety net. I'm done." I could hear her take a sharp breath. "Sarah, don't say that. You don't mean it. We can work this out. We're family. You're overreacting. Don't be dramatic." My heart skipped a beat, and my anger flared. Dramatic? Really? After everything they'd put me through, that's what she was going to say? "I'm not overreacting," I shot back. "I've been patient for so long. I've let you walk all over me, and I'm not doing it anymore. I've spent my entire life feeling like I didn't matter to you, like I was just an afterthought. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that everything's fine when you treat me like this." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear my mom's breath, shallow and shaky. She didn't know how to respond. And for the first time, I didn't feel bad about it. "You don't understand, Sarah," she finally said, her voice breaking. "We're just trying to help. It's not easy for any of us." "No, you're not," I replied, voice firm. "You've never been about helping. You've been about controlling." She didn't say anything after that. I hung up, knowing that things had just changed forever. There was a strange mix of relief and dread coursing through me. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't sure if it was from the anger still burning inside or the weight of what I'd just done. Cutting ties with my family, well, at least part of it, felt like a betrayal, but at the same time, it felt like the most honest thing I'd done in years. I stared at the phone for a moment longer, feeling the silence in my house, the absence of all those familiar yet suffocating family dynamics. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. It was like the calm after a storm, where the winds had just died down, and all that was left was the wreckage. But I knew it was necessary. I'd spent so long bending over backward for people who didn't truly care about me. And now, I was finally standing up for myself, putting my son first. I wasn't going to let my own family continue to drag me down with their expectations, their guilt trips, and their favoritism. For years, I had let them make me feel like I wasn't enough, like I had to earn my place in the family, like I had to prove myself every damn day. And in the end, nothing was ever enough. I wasn't about to let my son grow up watching that kind of toxic behavior. He deserved better than that. He deserved to see a strong, confident mother who knew her worth, who knew how to set boundaries, and who wasn't afraid to walk away from relationships that no longer served her. The phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Emily. "Sarah, please don't do this. I'm sorry. I know I've messed up, but you're making it worse. You're breaking up the family. I need you. We all do. You can't just walk away from us. We're your family." The words felt so hollow. You're breaking up the family. That was always the threat, wasn't it? The ultimate guilt trip. The one thing they could use to make me feel like I was the bad guy. But this time, it didn't work. I didn't feel a pang of guilt. I didn't feel bad for making the hard choice. I felt empowered. I didn't even bother responding. Instead, I locked my phone and turned it off. I didn't need to hear anymore. I needed space to think. I needed to focus on myself and my son. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't constantly worried about their drama. I wasn't pacing around wondering if they were going to come after me again, demanding an explanation or playing their usual emotional games. That night, I curled up on the couch with my son, who was playing quietly beside me. I'd been so caught up in the drama for so long that I'd almost forgotten how peaceful it could be just the two of us. The weight that had been on my chest for years seemed to lift a little bit, and I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't have to worry about all the tension and resentment that had been building for years. I didn't have to feel like I had to choose between my son and my family. The next few days were quieter than I expected. My phone stayed silent, and I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or nervous. Was this the calm before the storm? I had no idea, but something told me this was just the beginning. I had no illusions that my family was going to let me go so easily. They were going to fight. They were going to push and pull, try to guilt trip me, try to manipulate me into coming back. But I was ready for it. A week later, the inevitable happened. My mom showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She didn't call first. She just appeared on my doorstep, her face pained but determined. I could see she'd been crying, her eyes red-rimmed. But I wasn't going to fall for it this time. Not this time. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe, studying her without saying anything. "Sarah," she began, voice soft and wavering. "You can't just do this. We're your family. You can't cut us off like this. I've been calling, but you won't answer. I need you to understand." "I do understand, Mom," I replied, my voice steady. "I understand that you've always made me feel second to Emily. I understand that no matter what I do, it's never enough. And I understand that if I keep allowing myself to be treated like this, nothing will ever change." Her face twisted in shock, like she didn't know what to say to that. She took a step back, as though my words had physically pushed her away. "You don't mean that," she said, almost pleading. "You can't. You're just upset, and I get it. But you don't understand what you're doing. This isn't just about you and Emily. This is about the family." "No, it's about me," I snapped. "For once, it's about me. And I'm done. I've spent my whole life trying to be good enough for you, for Emily. I've tried to be everything you wanted me to be, but it's never been enough. I've had enough of the games. I've had enough of the drama. And I'm not coming back this time." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a split second, I almost felt guilty. But I shook my head, willing the feeling away. I couldn't let myself fall back into the same old cycle of manipulation and guilt. "I love you, Mom," I said, my voice softening just a bit. "But I need to love myself more. I need to stand up for what's right for me. And right now, that means walking away." She stood there for a long moment, staring at me, her face a mix of disbelief and sadness. But I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. I didn't back down. Finally, she turned and walked away. There were no more words, no more guilt trips. And as she disappeared down the driveway, I closed the door behind me, locking it without looking back. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead was going to be tough. But I had made my decision, and there was no going back. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own life. No more manipulation. No more guilt. Just me, my son, and the peace I had earned. And I wasn't going to let anything or anyone take that away from me. It was over. I was 26 when I realized just how invisible I'd been in my own family. My name's Dax, and for most of my life, I thought being quiet, dependable, and useful would earn me love. Turns out, it just made me convenient. My older brother, Chase, was the golden child, loud, confident, and effortlessly charming. He could break a rule, ruin a car, or fail a semester, and my parents would still call him their little star. Me? I could bring home a promotion, pay off one of their loans, or fix the leaky roof, and they'd nod absently before asking if I could grab groceries on my way back. That's the kind of dynamic I grew up in, one where effort didn't matter, only spotlight did. When I got my first remote tech job, I thought things might change. Suddenly, I was earning well enough to cover my rent, my bills, and even help out at home. Mom would call about unexpected expenses, and I'd send over a few hundred. Dad would sigh about tight months, and I'd cover the difference. It wasn't pity, I wanted to help. I told myself, they raised you. This is the least you can do. But over time, those small favors turned into recurring transfers, then into entire bills. I was paying their utilities, helping with the mortgage, and even covering Chase's student loans. Somehow, I'd become the family's financial backbone, and nobody said a word of thanks. It started feeling heavy about 2 years ago, when I realized my savings weren't growing even though I earned more than enough. One night, I opened my budgeting app and stared at the numbers. Nearly 40% of my income went straight to my parents. I tried to justify it. They were getting older, things were hard, but something in me felt off. Every time I said no to dinner with friends or skipped upgrading my laptop, it wasn't because I was saving. It was because I was quietly funding my brother's latest dream. Chase had that effortless kind of privilege you can't teach. He was 28, still living at home, claiming he was finding his path. His path apparently led through half-finished side hustles, expensive vacations, and a social media feed full of designer shoes and self-care quotes. Whenever I mentioned maybe asking him to chip in at home, Mom would get defensive. "He's still figuring things out." "Dax," she'd say, You were always the independent one. The irony was painful. My independence was the reason they felt entitled to lean on me indefinitely. Things reached a strange tension last spring, right before his birthday. I'd been planning to cut back on how much I sent home, just to focus on my own life for once. I had a small dream of visiting Japan, something I'd talked about since college. I even started setting aside a Japan fund. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then, a week before Chase's birthday, Mom called sounding excited. "We have a surprise for him," she said. I remember her voice practically buzzing. "He's going to love it." I smiled, genuinely happy for once. "That's great, Mom. What is it?" She hesitated for just a second before saying, "You'll see at the party." I didn't think much of it until that day. The living room was decorated like something out of a travel vlog. Suitcases as props, posters of Italy, tiny flags on the cake. The whole family was there, laughing, chatting, everyone pretending like this was the most natural thing in the world. Then came the big reveal. They handed Chase a glossy envelope. Inside was a fully paid trip to Italy. 2 weeks, all expenses covered. I remember his jaw dropping, Mom tearing up, Dad clapping him on the back. "You've always made us proud, son," she said through her smile, hugging him. I stood there, half clapping, my mouth dry. Proud. Proud of what? When it came time for me to open my gift, I tried not to expect anything fancy. I never did. But the contrast was brutal. It was a $25 gift card to a coffee chain and a small handwritten note. "Sometimes life isn't about the big things," Mom said as I unfolded it. "It's about appreciating the little ones." Everyone laughed softly, like she'd said something profound. I forced a smile, my throat tight, and nodded. "Thanks," I said, because what else could I say? The rest of the evening felt like a blur. I smiled in photos, laughed at jokes I didn't hear, and helped clean up after everyone left. Chase spent half the night showing off travel blogs, talking about all the amazing content he'd make abroad. He even asked me if I could help him edit the photos when he got back. I said sure. Inside, though, something had shifted, something quiet but irreversible. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in my car outside their house, engine off, watching the porch light flicker. The house I'd been helping to keep afloat for years. I thought about all the nights I stayed up late working so they wouldn't have to worry. All the plans I'd postponed. All the moments I let myself believe that loyalty would eventually be noticed. But now it was so clear, I wasn't family. I was a utility. I went home, opened my laptop, and started going through my finances. My direct deposits, my transfers, my automatic payments. And it hit me. Everything was still running through my account. I'd set it up years ago so bills wouldn't go unpaid. Electric, water, even the property tax reminders were under my name. I stared at the numbers for a long time, my finger hovering over the cancel button. I didn't do it, not yet. But the thought of it burned at the back of my mind. The next morning, I woke up to a cheerful text from Mom. "Can you help Chase get his travel insurance set up? He's not great with forms." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening, then typed back, "Sure." But my hands trembled. I realized that every time I said yes, a small part of me disappeared. Over the next few days, I found myself pulling back emotionally. I stopped answering calls immediately, delayed payments by a day, started keeping to myself. Chase noticed first. "You good, bro?" he asked casually one afternoon when I stopped by. "You've been kinda quiet." I just shrugged. "Yeah, just tired." Mom gave me that look, the one that said she didn't believe me but didn't care enough to ask. When the week after his birthday rolled around, I decided to test something. I skipped transferring the usual utility money. I wanted to see if they'd even notice, or maybe, if they'd just assume something had gone wrong with the bank. 2 days later, I got a message from Dad. "Hey, Dax, looks like the power bill didn't go through this month. Mind checking?" "No, please. No, thank you." Just the expectation that I'd fix it. I typed back, "On it." But I didn't send it. I just stared at the blinking cursor. Something inside me had gone very, very still. That weekend, I went over for dinner, and everything looked the same on the surface. Mom serving food, Chase talking about Rome, Dad half listening while scrolling on his phone. But under it all, something had changed in me. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just empty, detached. Like watching a movie I'd seen too many times. And then Mom said something that pushed me over the edge. She was laughing, cutting a slice of cake, when she turned to Chase and said, "You've always made us so proud. You just have that spark." Not like some people who get lost in work all day. Chase laughed. Dad chuckled. And me? I just froze, fork halfway to my mouth. That was the moment I knew I couldn't keep pretending. That night, I packed my laptop, my clothes, and a single suitcase. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. By the time the sun rose, I was miles away, sitting in a cafe with my laptop open. My inbox was full: work emails, family messages, bank alerts. I ignored all of them. Instead, I clicked through my financial accounts one last time. Every bill, every payment, every connection. And then, with a calmness I hadn't felt in years, I started severing them one by one. I didn't know it then, but what I did that morning would send my family spiraling within a week. And when they finally called, their voices weren't proud anymore. They were panicked. Because that was the day they realized their house, their comfort, their stability had all been standing on me. And I was done holding it up. But that's when things started getting ugly. Real ugly. When I woke up that first morning away from home, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet. It's strange, the peace that comes when you finally stop holding everything together. I was in a tiny rental apartment 2 cities over, still half-packed, with nothing but my laptop, some clothes, and a coffee mug. I checked my phone, 6 missed calls, all from Mom. 1 text from Dad: call us immediately. No, good morning. No, are you okay? Just demand disguised as concern. I didn't answer. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started working. My job had always been remote, and for once, I focused entirely on it, not juggling bills or double-checking payment reminders for a house that wasn't mine. By the afternoon, I got another message. This time from Chase. Hey bro, you didn't pay the mortgage. No, how are you? No acknowledgement that I'd disappeared overnight. Just a question about money. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. I don't live there anymore. It took him less than a minute to respond. Wait, what? What do you mean you don't live there anymore? I moved out. There was a pause, and then another bubble appeared. You can't just move out. Mom's freaking out. You didn't even tell anyone. I didn't think anyone would care. I typed back, then deleted it. I rewrote it softer. I needed space. Another minute passed. Then, so, are you still handling the bills, or? I put my phone face down. I didn't need to read the rest. That text said everything. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Some polite, some passive-aggressive, some just desperate. Power got cut off. Dad texted one morning. Can you transfer the money for the reconnection? We'll pay you back soon. I didn't respond. They wouldn't pay me back. They never had. By the end of the week, Mom finally called while I was in a meeting. I ignored it. Then she called again. And again. After the 5th call, I stepped outside to answer. Dax, she said immediately, voice trembling like she'd just run a marathon. What is going on? Why are the bills unpaid? The water's off, the internet's gone, and your father is furious. Because I stopped paying them, I said calmly. There was silence. Then, you what? I stopped paying. It's not my responsibility anymore, Mom. Of course it is, she snapped, her tone turning sharp. You've always helped out. We rely on you. I know, I said. That's the problem. Her voice softened, shifting tactics. Sweetheart, we're a family. We help each other. Yeah, I said, bitterness creeping in. Except it's never each other, is it? It's just me. She sighed dramatically. You're being ungrateful. We did everything for you when you were young. I almost laughed. And I've been doing everything for you since I was 22. That ended the conversation. She hung up after muttering something about talking later when you're not being dramatic. I went back to my desk, my hands shaking. I wasn't angry, at least, not in the usual way. I was tired of the same emotional pattern. Guilt, deflection, and then dismissal. They'd always used it like clockwork, and I'd always folded. But not this time. Still, the calls didn't stop. Chase tried again that night. His tone was friendlier than Mom's, but it had that same undertone of expectation. Dude, you're overreacting. You can't just leave everyone hanging. The house payments are in your name. They're in my name because no one else could get approved, I said. Remember? Yeah, but you knew that when you signed. You can't just bail. I can't, I said. And I did. Wow. Real mature, he said. You always do this. You get all moody and self-righteous. And then everyone else has to pick up the pieces. That one stung. Not because it was true, but because of how familiar it sounded. Chase had always flipped things that way. Every time he messed up, I ended up cleaning it up, and he still found a way to make me the villain. I took a slow breath. Chase, I've been paying for everything for years. You've been living rent-free, eating food I paid for, driving mom's car that I fixed, and I never once complained. Don't tell me about picking up pieces. He scoffed. You think you're better than everyone, don't you? No, I said quietly. I just finally realized I'm not worse. He didn't reply after that. The silence lasted about 2 days before Mom texted again, this time with a photo, her standing in the kitchen, next to a pile of unpaid bills. This is what you've done to us, the message read. We could lose the house. Something about the phrasing hit me. Not, we're struggling, or we need help. It was, you've done this. As if me stopping the bleeding made me responsible for the wound. I didn't answer. But that night, I sat in bed thinking about all the times I'd bailed them out. When Dad's car broke down, I paid for repairs. When Chase got a parking ticket, I covered it because Mom said it'd ruin his credit. When they wanted to remodel the kitchen, I co-signed a loan because you're the only one with a stable job. Every single time, I told myself it was temporary. But it never ended. Now that I'd finally stepped back, they were falling apart. And instead of reflecting on why, they were blaming me. A few days later, I decided to visit unannounced. I told myself it was to grab a few boxes I'd left behind, but deep down, I think I just wanted to see if things had really changed. When I walked through the front door, it was chaos. The house felt smaller, messier, louder. Mom was on the phone arguing with the utility company. Dad was pacing in the living room, and Chase was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone like nothing was wrong. When they saw me, the energy shifted instantly. Mom hung up mid-sentence and rushed over, her expression melting into practiced relief. Oh, thank goodness. I knew you'd come to your senses. I set my keys down calmly. I'm just here to grab some stuff. Her smile faltered. Dax, please. Let's talk about this like adults. Dad folded his arms. This stunt of yours isn't funny. You're acting like a child. I tilted my head. I'm acting like a child because I stopped paying your bills. You're acting like a child because you're punishing your family, he said sharply. That word, punishing, made something inside me twist. You mean holding you accountable? Mom interjected quickly. We're not the enemy here, Dax. We just need you to understand how much this family depends on you. Yeah, I said quietly. That's exactly the problem. Chase rolled his eyes. Here we go? Mr. Martyr again. I turned to him. You don't get to talk. He laughed. Oh, I don't. You think you're the only one who's had it rough. Yes, I said flatly. You are literally being sent to Italy for free while I get lectures about gratitude. Mom gasped. Don't twist this into jealousy. It's not jealousy, I said, my voice low. It's clarity. For a second, the room went still. I could see in their faces that they weren't hearing me. They were waiting for me to back down. I'd seen that look 100 times before, and it always ended the same way. I'd sigh, apologize, and fix whatever mess they were in. But not this time. I grabbed the last box from my old room, turned around, and headed for the door. Mom's voice followed me. You're really just going to walk away from your family? I stopped at the threshold, hand on the doorknob. No, I said softly. I'm walking away from being your safety net. And then I left. That should have been the end of it. But a few days later, I found out how far they were willing to go to drag me back. It started with my HR department reaching out, saying they'd received a call from someone claiming to be me, asking about my employment verification and income details. My stomach dropped. When I called back to clarify, they said, it was your mother. She said you were applying for a loan together. Except I wasn't. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. You've always helped us before, she said. We just assumed you'd still want to. You tried to take out a loan in my name, I said slowly, my voice shaking. Don't be so dramatic, she said. We were just looking into options. That was the first time in my life I hung up on my mother. By the end of that week, I'd frozen my credit, changed my banking passwords, and called my landlord to make sure no one could use my name for anything. My hands were trembling the entire time, but under the fear was something else, a cold, quiet certainty. They weren't just entitled. They were desperate. And I knew, deep down, that they weren't done. Not by a long shot. 2 weeks passed after the loan incident, and I honestly thought maybe, they'd finally gotten the message. No calls, no texts, no surprise knocks at my door. The quiet was almost eerie, but peaceful in its own way. I started sleeping better, eating better, even taking walks after work without the constant dread of another "we need to talk" message. For the first time in years, I felt like my life belonged to me again. But peace never lasts long when someone's used to living off your effort. It started subtly. One afternoon, I got an email from my landlord saying he'd received a concerned call about me, someone claiming I'd been struggling financially and might not be able to make rent. He assured me it wasn't a problem since I'd never missed a payment, but it bothered him enough to mention it. I didn't even have to ask who it was. That night, I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, her voice overly sweet, like she'd been expecting this exact call. "Oh, Dax. How are you, sweetheart? We haven't heard from you in ages." "I'm fine," I said evenly. "Did you call my landlord?" There was a tiny pause, barely a second, but I caught it. "Of course not," she said. "Why would I do that?" I didn't respond. "Unless," she continued, her tone shifting into faux concern, "maybe Chase mentioned something? You know how he worries about you." "Right," I said. "He worries about me. That's why he told my landlord I'm broke." The line went quiet. Then she sighed dramatically. "You're overreacting again. We just wanted to make sure you're okay." "I'm not your dependent," I said. "You don't need to check in with my landlord, my boss, or my bank." "Excuse me," she snapped. "We've done nothing but support you your whole life, and this is how you talk to me?" There it was again, the rewrite of reality. I'd been their crutch for years, but in her version, they were the generous ones. I ended the call before she could twist it further. Still, the paranoia lingered. I changed my passwords again, added two-factor authentication to everything, even told HR to lock my personal info behind a security code. I wasn't angry yet, just cautious. Then came the weekend that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning, early spring, and I was running errands when I got a notification from my bank. "Unusual activity detected on your account." My stomach dropped. I opened the app, and there it was, a $5,000 transfer pending to an account I didn't recognize. I froze. Then I saw the name. Chase W. I felt my blood pressure spike. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks. I immediately called the bank and canceled the transfer before it cleared. They confirmed it had been initiated through online access. When I asked how that was possible, the rep said, "It came from a device previously used for your account." And that's when it hit me. Months ago, during a family dinner, Chase had borrowed my laptop to look something up. He'd probably seen my password autofilled, maybe even saved it. I'd changed it once since then, but not before he could have linked a device. I sat there in my car, shaking, not because of the money, but because it was him. My brother. The same brother whose Italy trip I had unknowingly funded. The same one who'd never once said thank you for years of handouts. I called him immediately. He answered on the second ring, casual as ever. "Yo, what's up? You tried to transfer $5,000 from my account." There was a pause, followed by a laugh. "Oh, that? Yeah, I was going to text you. It was just temporary. I needed to pay for something quick. You know I was good for it." I couldn't even speak for a second. "You stole from me." "Dude, don't make it sound so dramatic," he said. "You've always helped out before. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," I said, my voice trembling now. "You went into my account without asking. You used my personal information." He scoffed. "You're really blowing this up. Mom said you've been stressed lately. Maybe just take a breath, yeah?" That sentence, the way he said it, that calm, patronizing tone, made something inside me snap. I realized in that moment that they didn't see me as a person anymore. I was a walking resource, a bank with emotions they didn't have to acknowledge. "I'm done," I said, my voice flat. "Don't ever contact me again." He laughed like I'd told a joke. "Come on, bro, stop being weird. It's not like you're perfect either. You left us high and dry." "I left because of this," I said. "Because of exactly this." I hung up before he could respond, then blocked his number. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit in the car for several minutes. That night, I got an email from my mom. The subject line read, "We need to talk about Chase." Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was long, written in that manipulative tone she used whenever she wanted to guilt me into something. She wrote that Chase had been struggling, that the Italy trip hadn't gone as planned, that he made a mistake, but I shouldn't blow things out of proportion. The kicker came in the middle. "You know how he looks up to you. You've always been his safety net, and deep down, you love that. Don't pretend you don't." I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. Then I deleted the email. But the betrayal didn't stop there. A few days later, my HR department contacted me again, this time about something far worse. "Hey, Dax," my manager said cautiously on the call. "We got a strange email about you from what looked like your personal address. It said you were resigning effective immediately and transferring your accounts to a family member. But it didn't sound like you." My heart dropped. "That wasn't me," I said instantly. They forwarded it. It was from an address that looked almost identical to mine, one extra letter in the domain name. The email read, "Thank you for the opportunity. I'm stepping away to focus on family matters. My brother Chase will be taking over my client accounts for now." I felt sick. It was sophisticated, deliberate, and the fact that it mentioned Chase wasn't an accident. I spent the next 24 hours unraveling it. I found out the fake email had been created using my photo from LinkedIn, my old signature, and even my work title, all things easily found online. But whoever did it had gone a step further. They'd sent follow-ups to 2 of my clients before HR caught on. It could have tanked my credibility completely. When I confronted Chase about it, because who else could it be? He denied it, of course. "You think I'd waste time pretending to be you?" he said. "You're paranoid, man. You need help." Mom backed him up immediately. "Dax, you need to stop accusing your brother. He's been through enough." "He's been through enough?" I said, incredulous. "He tried to steal from me. He was desperate," she said. "Family helps family. You used to understand that." That was the moment I realized there was no reaching them. No apology, no confrontation, no logic would ever break through that wall of entitlement. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. In their eyes, I was the problem, for daring to pull away, for refusing to keep being used. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just went cold. "If you contact my job again," I said quietly, "I'll involve the police." Her voice cracked into outrage. "You'd really call the police on your family?" "Yes," I said, "on anyone who steals from me." I hung up. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, the only sound the quiet hum of the fridge. I felt hollow, not even angry, just done. You can only get betrayed so many times before it stops hurting and starts clarifying. I backed up every file on my laptop, changed all my passwords again, and locked down every account I had. But even as I did it, I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Because stealing money was one thing. Pretending to be me, trying to replace me, was another. And somewhere deep down, I knew they weren't finished. I just didn't realize how far they'd go next. When the next betrayal came, it wouldn't just cost me money. It would cost me something far more personal. And by then, I wouldn't be the same Dax they used to know. The weeks after the fake resignation email felt like living in a fog. I'd wake up every morning to silence that should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. It was hollow. Every ping from my phone made my chest tighten. I kept expecting another email, another crisis, another attempt to drag me back into their chaos. My apartment, once a place of relief, started feeling like a bunker. I stopped answering unknown numbers entirely. At one point, I even unplugged my landline after getting a string of voicemails that alternated between my mom crying and my dad demanding I fix the mess I made. According to them, Chase had lost access to some of his business accounts because of what I'd said to my bank, and somehow that was my fault too. They never once admitted what they'd done. In their version of the story, I was the one who'd betrayed them. But the real blow came a week later. I got home from work one evening, exhausted but trying to keep myself busy, laundry, cooking, anything that didn't involve thinking, when I saw a white envelope taped to my door. My name was written across the front in my mother's handwriting. I froze. For a second, I thought about throwing it away. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a printed letter and a photograph. The letter was long, 3 pages, and started with, "We still love you, even if you've lost your way." She went on about family, about forgiveness, about how I'd become cold and ungrateful, how money had poisoned my heart. She claimed they'd only ever acted out of love, that I was misremembering things, that Chase hadn't stolen anything. He'd borrowed from me because he thought I'd understand. And then came the real gut punch. "If you can't be part of this family, we'll have to find a way to protect ourselves. Chase talked to a lawyer, and since the house and utilities are still under your name, we might need to take action to separate our finances legally. I hope it doesn't come to that. Please call us before it's too late." I felt my stomach twist. Then I looked at the photograph. It was an old picture of me at 18, graduation day, arm around Chase, both of us smiling like we actually liked each other. On the back, in her handwriting, was one sentence. "You used to be such a good brother." I sat down on the floor right there in the hallway and just stared at that photo for a long time. There's a special kind of pain that comes from realizing your family doesn't just misunderstand you. They've rewritten who you are in their minds. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same image, my family sitting together, eating dinner, laughing, while I sat outside, invisible. Not out of sight, but out of memory. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my friend Tyler. He'd been my roommate back in college, one of the few people who'd seen firsthand what my home life was like. When I told him everything, how Chase had stolen money, how they tried to impersonate me, how they were now threatening legal action, he was silent for a few seconds. "Dude," he finally said, "that's not family. That's a scam with better lighting." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Yeah, well, it's my scam." "Not anymore," he said. "You need to protect yourself. Talk to a lawyer, lock down your credit, document everything. And most importantly, don't go back there. Not even to talk. That's how they pull you in." He was right. I knew he was right. So I spent the next week doing exactly that. I gathered every document I could, bank statements, transfer logs, even old text messages. I met with a legal advisor through my job's benefits program. She listened patiently as I laid it all out, and when I was done, she said, "Dax, you need to formally remove your name from anything connected to their property. Otherwise, they can still use your information." So I started the process. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, every line that tied me to that house. I began cutting away piece by piece. But of course, they noticed. The first sign came when Dad called me from a new number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted closure, or maybe just confirmation that I wasn't crazy. The moment I said hello, his voice came through sharp. "What do you think you're doing?" "Protecting myself," I said. "From us," he barked. "We're your parents, Dax. Do you know how this looks? You're making us look like fools." "I'm not making you look like anything," I said. "You did that yourselves." There was a pause. Then his tone changed, lower, colder. "You think you're so much better than us because you make a little money. But don't forget who raised you." I didn't respond, because the truth was, they didn't raise me. They just happened to be there while I raised myself. After that call, something inside me broke completely. Not in an explosive way, more like glass cracking under pressure. Quiet, irreversible. I started drifting through my days. Work became mechanical. Conversations felt rehearsed. My coworkers noticed the difference, but I brushed it off as stress. Nights were worse. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, going over every moment in my head, every red flag I'd ignored. And then came the day that pushed me to rock bottom. I got home from work to find my apartment door slightly open. For a second, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to close it properly that morning. But when I stepped inside, my stomach dropped. Someone had been there. Nothing was stolen. Not exactly. But drawers had been opened, papers moved. My personal mail, which I kept in a small box, had been rifled through. On the counter sat a half-empty cup of coffee from the local cafe 2 blocks away, the same one Chase used to post about on Instagram. I knew it instantly. He'd been here. I stood there in the middle of the living room, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. He'd crossed a line even my parents hadn't. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. About reminding me that no matter how far I went, they could still reach me. I called the police, filed a report, changed my locks the same night. The officer was polite but detached, like this was just another line on his clipboard. "Any chance it's a family member?" he asked. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's the problem." After he left, I sat on the floor surrounded by my scattered things. For the first time, I cried. Not angry tears, just tired ones. The kind that come when you've been strong for too long. In that moment, I realized something that hit me harder than any betrayal ever could. They weren't going to stop because I wanted them to. They were only going to stop when it cost them to keep going. That's when the first spark of resolve flickered to life. I didn't act right away. I didn't scream, or post online, or try to confront them again. I went quiet, methodical. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, screenshots. I set up 2 hidden cameras inside my apartment, just in case they came back. I transferred my savings to a new account at a different bank. And then I started looking into exactly how much of their comfort was still tied to my name. The mortgage, I learned, was technically under my credit line, meaning I could freeze it. The utilities were still linked to my online payment portal, which I could revoke access to. Their internet plan, their car insurance, even some of Chase's phone bills, all traced back to accounts I had opened years ago to help the family. I realized something darkly poetic about it all. They'd built their life on my foundations. Every luxury they had, every safety net, they didn't just owe me money. They owed me stability. And now, I had the power to take it all back. But I didn't do it yet. Not immediately. Because revenge born in anger is messy. I didn't want messy. I wanted precise. Quiet. Final. So I waited. I kept working, kept saving, kept planning. On the surface, I looked calm again, someone who'd finally moved on. But underneath that calm, I was building something. Not just an exit. An ending. One that they wouldn't see coming until everything they'd leaned on collapsed beneath them. And when that day came, I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to gloat. I was just going to walk away, this time for good. But first, I had to watch them unravel a little longer. And they were about to give me the perfect opportunity. Because Chase, he wasn't done making mistakes. And the next one he made would open the door for me to end this whole story on my terms. When the dust finally settled after the break-in, I thought I'd be stuck in survival mode forever. But something shifted in me after that night. Fear had burned out completely. What replaced it was focus. Cold, steady focus. I stopped reacting to everything my family did and started building. Not revenge yet, just stability. I threw myself into work. My company was small but growing fast, a startup that specialized in network security. It felt poetic, in a way, that I spent my days protecting clients from the exact kind of invasion I'd just lived through. I started volunteering for extra projects, late-night code reviews, even helping troubleshoot client systems. I didn't care about overtime. I cared about control. Within 6 months, I'd earned 2 internal promotions. My boss, who used to barely remember my name, started calling me his anchor. The raise that came with it was significant enough to change everything. I upgraded to a larger apartment, furnished it exactly how I wanted, minimal, quiet, clean. Every purchase felt symbolic. The new laptop? Mine. The framed photo of me standing alone at a lake? Also mine. My world had finally stopped revolving around them. For a while, it felt too good to be real. I reconnected with people I'd drifted from, friends from college, coworkers who'd only ever known the quiet, exhausted version of me. They started inviting me to dinners, movie nights, weekend trips. I didn't say yes to everything, but when I did, I actually showed up. No, sorry, can't make it, because Mom needed money for a small emergency. One Friday, after a long week, I met Tyler again for coffee. He studied me for a minute and said, "You look different, like you finally exhaled." Maybe I did, I said, smiling for real this time. He nodded. Told you once you stopped feeding them, you'd grow. He was right, but he didn't know how much I'd grown. While my personal life settled, my professional one exploded. My name started circulating in the tech space, small conferences, LinkedIn mentions, even invitations to guest-write cybersecurity articles. I didn't think much of it until a recruiter reached out from a major firm. It was the kind of company I used to dream about, but never thought I'd touch. After 3 interviews, they offered me a salary that tripled what I was making when I'd left home. I accepted without hesitation. The first paycheck from that job didn't just feel like money. It felt like freedom printed on paper. I set up new savings accounts, started investing, even hired a financial advisor. For the first time, my future didn't feel fragile. It felt earned. But success has a way of drawing old ghosts back. The first sign came through social media. Chase had unblocked me, or maybe made a new account, and started liking my posts again. Photos of my workspace, my travels, my new apartment. At first, I ignored it. But then came the message request. "Bro, we should talk. I miss you." It was short, casual, and completely tone-deaf. Like none of the chaos had ever happened. I didn't reply. 2 days later. "Mom said you're doing well. She's proud of you." That one made me laugh out loud. Proud. The same woman who'd accused me of being poisoned by money? Still, I didn't respond. Weeks passed. I started consulting on the side, building small digital tools to automate cybersecurity reports. It started as a hobby, but quickly turned profitable. I named it Sentinel Flow, just a simple platform for small businesses. But to my surprise, it took off. Within a year, I had 3 part-time employees and a few $1,000s a month in recurring revenue. And that's when the old bitterness started to fade, not replaced by forgiveness, but by perspective. I realized they'd built their lives on dependency because it was easy. I'd built mine on survival because it was necessary. And now, that difference had turned into power. But the real turning point came at a tech conference. I'd been invited as a speaker to talk about data security for small startups. It wasn't a huge event, but it felt symbolic. Me, standing on a stage, talking about boundaries and protection. Midway through my talk, I looked out over the crowd and saw a face I didn't expect. Chase. He was sitting near the back, arms crossed, wearing that same smug expression he always wore when he thought he was being clever. For a second, I lost my train of thought. Then I caught myself, refocused, and finished my presentation. Afterward, he came up to me like we were old friends. "Man, that was impressive," he said, grinning. "You've really leveled up. What are you doing here?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Networking. Thought I'd check it out. Plus, I figured it's time we clear the air." "There's no air to clear," I said. "We're done, Chase." He leaned in slightly. "Come on, Dax. Don't be like that. We're brothers." "No," I said. "We're related." "That's not the same thing." For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. He just looked at me. Really looked, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw something like realization in his eyes. Maybe regret. Or maybe just confusion that his favorite target didn't bend anymore. He didn't push it. He just said, "Mom's not doing great, by the way. She keeps saying you're gonna regret walking away." I met his gaze. "She's been saying that my whole life." And I walked away. That night, I went back to my hotel room and opened my laptop. My company dashboard glowed on the screen, full of client updates and growth metrics. I thought about how far I'd come since that night. I packed my laptop and left. It hit me then. I didn't owe them revenge. I didn't owe them anything. But I also realized something else. They still owed me. Not money, not apologies, but closure. And I wasn't going to ask for it. I was going to take it. A month later, something interesting happened. My old financial advisor called to ask about a mortgage release form he'd been CC'd on. Apparently, their house, was still registered under my credit. And since I'd improved my financial standing significantly, the bank had contacted me about requalification. That's when the idea started forming. If I legally separated myself from that mortgage, it would trigger a review of the household's financial eligibility, meaning the loan would revert entirely to them. And with Chase's unstable income and my parents' limited credit, they'd lose every subsidy and low-interest rate tied to my name. It wasn't sabotage. It was correction. But before doing anything, I made sure I was bulletproof. I spoke to lawyers, read every clause, made sure every action I took was by the book. And once everything was airtight, I filed the paperwork. 2 weeks later, I got an email confirming the mortgage transfer had been completed. I read it once, twice, 3 times, then exhaled the longest breath of my life. That night, I went out to celebrate. I didn't tell anyone what for. I just sat at a rooftop bar overlooking the city, a glass of bourbon in hand, watching the skyline pulse with life. I thought about the version of me that used to live in that house, quiet, obedient, waiting for scraps of approval. He was gone. In his place was someone unrecognizable, someone capable, independent. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving their world. I was thriving in mine. Still, I knew it wasn't over. I could feel it, the quiet before the next storm. My family had always been predictable that way. When they lost control, they didn't accept it. They schemed to get it back. And right now, they were about to find out what life looked like without my money propping it up. But what I didn't realize yet, what none of us did, was that they were already plotting something far bolder, far dumber, and far more public than anything they'd ever tried before. And when it came, it would make every betrayal before it look small. Because this time, they weren't just going to lose my help. They were going to lose their reputation. About 3 months after I'd severed myself from the mortgage, I got a letter from the bank confirming the transfer had gone through and that all associated responsibilities were officially theirs. That same day, I got a text from Chase. "What did you do?" "The bank froze our account." I didn't reply, but I smiled, because that was just the start. For years, they'd built their comfort on the quiet assumption that I'd always be there, paying, fixing, bailing them out before the cracks showed. Now those cracks were widening into canyons. The mortgage had reset to a higher rate. The utilities defaulted to unpaid status, and Chase's credit had taken a nosedive since the fake loan stunt. The entire structure of their financial life was collapsing, and I hadn't lifted a single illegal finger. But I wasn't just sitting back and watching. I had a plan. See, my side project Sentinel Flow had grown faster than expected. We'd landed a partnership with a mid-sized cybersecurity firm that gave us exposure to government and corporate clients. That meant resources, data access, legal contacts, and, ironically, tools for digital tracing. I wasn't looking to spy on my family, but I was curious about something. During the months they'd been quiet, a strange rumor had started floating around in my old hometown circles, that I'd embezzled money from my parents, that I'd been cut off for stealing, that I was under investigation. It was absurd, but it spread fast. A few old family friends even unfollowed me online. When I finally traced the origin, I found a burner Facebook account that posted these stories using photos only my family had access to. Pictures of me as a teenager, old screenshots from family group chats, even one of me on my graduation day. There was only one person who could have had access to all that: Chase. It was stupid, reckless, and so obviously personal that it almost made me laugh. But instead of confronting him, I decided to turn it into something useful. I contacted an attorney friend through one of my new business partners. He specialized in defamation and identity protection. When I showed him the screenshots and explained the history, impersonation, unauthorized access, money theft, he looked at me like I'd just handed him a gold mine. "Dax," he said, leaning back in his chair, "if half of this is provable, you could bury them in court. Financial fraud, defamation, unauthorized use of private data. This isn't family drama anymore. It's criminal." But I didn't want a drawn-out lawsuit. I wanted something quieter and much more permanent. He helped me set up a comprehensive cease and desist package, backed by notarized evidence, and a drafted police report ready to be filed if they so much as breathed in my direction again. Every photo, message, and document was time-stamped, cataloged, and legally sealed. The next time they tried to twist the truth, I'd have receipts sharper than a blade. But I didn't stop there. I also reached out to the mortgage company again, explaining the history of unauthorized access to my accounts. They launched an internal audit and, as a result, flagged the family's address for irregular payment activity. That meant every financial move they made from that address now required manual verification. No more automatic payments. No more using my old information to bypass checks. And then I waited. It took about 3 weeks before the fallout hit. Mom called first, voicemail this time, since I hadn't unblocked her number. Her voice was shrill and frantic. "Dax, what did you do? The mortgage company is asking for documents we don't even have. They're saying your name's connected to an audit. This could ruin us." I just let it play. The next day, Chase sent an email, his last attempt at pretending to be the victim. "You didn't have to go this far. You made your point, okay? We get it. But you're destroying our lives. Do you really hate us that much?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied with one line. "No, I just stopped letting you destroy mine." And then, for the first time, I blocked him completely. But fate wasn't done delivering irony yet. About a month later, my company Sentinel Flow got shortlisted for a Regional Business Innovation Award. It was the kind of event covered by local press, photos, interviews, all that. I didn't think much of it until I saw my parents' names in a familiar community Facebook thread under the article about my nomination. Mom had commented, "We're so proud of our son Dax. We always knew he'd make something of himself." The comments underneath were brutal. People they'd lied to for months were calling them out, linking screenshots of their earlier gossip, asking, "Weren't you just saying he stole from you?" The irony must have hit them like a freight train. Their reputation, the one they'd always protected more than their relationships, was collapsing in public view. I didn't have to lift a finger. The truth had a way of surfacing on its own once people stopped hearing my side only through them. But my real revenge wasn't the public embarrassment. It was what came after. A month later, I was offered a relocation opportunity, a position overseeing our new cybersecurity division overseas. 6 figures, housing covered, travel included. The day I got the offer letter, I felt something inside me go completely still. That night, I packed the same laptop I'd packed the night I walked out of their house years ago. I stared at it for a moment, remembering how that decision had terrified me. Now it just felt right. Before leaving, I made one final move. Through my lawyer, I sent a certified letter to their address, a formal document stating that any attempt to use my name, likeness, or information would trigger immediate legal action, supported by evidence already registered with authorities. The letter also clarified that I was no longer financially or legally associated with them in any capacity. And at the bottom, I added one handwritten line. You taught me to appreciate the little things. Losing me was one of them. I mailed it the day before my flight. The next morning, as I sat at the airport gate waiting to board, I got one last text, an unsaved number, but I knew who it was. We got your letter. You didn't have to do this. I didn't reply. I just smiled, closed my phone, and walked toward the boarding line. When the plane lifted off the ground, I looked out the window and realized something simple but profound. Revenge wasn't about watching them burn. It was about finally feeling light enough to stop carrying the ashes. They'd built their lives around using me. I'd built mine around outgrowing them. And for the first time in my life, they couldn't touch a single part of it. The house they lived in, no longer mine. The money they spent, no longer mine. The person they controlled, gone. And somewhere below, as the clouds swallowed the skyline, I knew they were sitting in that same crumbling house, wondering how everything had fallen apart. The truth was, it didn't fall apart. I just stopped holding it up. But little did I know, there was one final twist waiting, a message that would come months later from someone I never expected, reopening the story I thought I'd already ended. 6 months after I left the country, my life felt almost unrecognizable. The air in the new city was different, crisper, cleaner, lighter. I rented a small apartment overlooking the sea, just 10 minutes from my company's new headquarters. My days were simple but full. Work, morning runs, cooking my own meals, and long evenings watching the sunset from my balcony. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact every time my phone buzzed. The nightmares about Chase breaking into my apartment had stopped. I'd started dating someone, Elena, a data analyst from work who understood the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of giving yourself away to people who never gave back. She never asked too many questions about my family, and I never volunteered more than I wanted to. I thought that chapter of my life was over. Until one morning, while I was reviewing reports with coffee in hand, I got an email from an old acquaintance back home. The subject line read, "You should see this." Attached was a link to a local news article. My stomach tightened as soon as I saw the headline. Local family faces foreclosure and fraud investigation after financial irregularities. There it was. My parents' house, my childhood home, in the background of a photo taken by a local journalist. The story detailed how the mortgage had defaulted, how payments had been flagged for unauthorized alterations, and how the residents were under investigation for potential misuse of financial documents. There was even a quote from a neighbor saying, "They always seemed well off. I guess things weren't as perfect as they looked." I scrolled down and saw the kicker, Chase's name. He'd apparently tried to refinance the property using my old information again. The system caught it instantly because of the audit I'd set in motion months earlier. The investigation revealed a pattern of manipulation and unauthorized access going back years. The article didn't mention me by name, but anyone who knew the family would understand what had happened. I didn't feel triumphant. Not right away. Mostly, I felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm levels everything, and all that's left is sunlight on debris. That evening, Elena noticed I was distant. "Bad day?" she asked softly. I showed her the article. She read it carefully, then looked up at me. "How do you feel?" I thought for a moment. Like justice doesn't always need an audience. She smiled faintly. Then maybe it's finally done. Maybe it was. A week later, I got a letter forwarded through my company's legal department. It was from my mother. I almost threw it out, but something made me open it. The handwriting was shaky this time, less polished, more desperate. "Dax, we've lost the house. Chase is in trouble. I don't know what to do. I wish things had been different. Your father doesn't speak much anymore. He says this is all you're doing, but I know deep down it isn't. I know we pushed you too hard. Maybe we just didn't know how to love you the way you needed. I'm sorry, truly. If you ever find it in your heart to forgive us, we'll be here." There was no return address, just her name. I sat there for a long time, staring at that letter. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was survival dressed up as remorse. But still, part of me felt a weight lift. Because for the first time, she'd admitted it. We pushed you too hard. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Life moved forward, and I moved with it. The company expanded, my side business grew, and I found myself mentoring young programmers who reminded me of me. Quiet, reliable, overlooked. I told them something I wish someone had told me years ago. Don't let being needed make you forget your worth. Months later, Tyler visited me overseas. We sat by the water, catching up over drinks. He'd heard bits of the story through mutual friends and shook his head as I filled in the rest. You really did it, huh? He said, raising his glass. You walked out of the fire and didn't look back. Not exactly, I said. I just stopped trying to put it out. He laughed. So what happened to them? Your parents, Chase? I shrugged. The last I heard, they moved in with an aunt. The house was auctioned off. Chase tried to start some online business, but it didn't last. They're surviving, I guess. Do you ever think about talking to them again? I took a long sip before answering. No. I think about forgiving them sometimes, but I don't mistake that for wanting them back. He nodded, thoughtful. You know, most people who go through something like that end up bitter. You came out calm. I smiled faintly. I was bitter for a long time. Then I realized bitterness means they still have space in your head. I evicted them. He laughed again, but softer this time. The night stretched on. The ocean breeze was cool, the city lights shimmering across the water. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about my parents without anger. I pictured the house, the kitchen where I'd once sat feeling invisible, the night I packed my laptop and left. It all felt like someone else's life now, a story I'd outgrown. Still, one last moment of closure came unexpectedly. One Sunday morning, while cleaning my inbox, I found a message in the other folder, an old Facebook message from Chase. It had been sent weeks earlier, before his account was deleted. Hey Dax, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say I get it now. You were never the selfish one. I was. I thought you'd always be there to fix everything, but you were the only thing holding it together. When you left, it all fell apart, and at first I hated you for it. Now I think maybe that's what was supposed to happen. You didn't destroy our lives. You just stopped saving them. I don't know where we'll end up, but I hope you're happy. You deserve it. I sat there for a long while after reading that. No anger. No sadness. Just a strange peace. Because finally, he'd seen the truth I'd carried alone for years. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. That night, I went for a walk along the shore. The water glowed under the moonlight, the waves soft and rhythmic. I thought about the journey, the years of being invisible, the betrayal, the loneliness, the slow climb back to myself. And I realized something that made me smile for real this time. Revenge hadn't rebuilt me. Peace had. Walking away hadn't been the punishment. It had been the cure. Somewhere across the ocean, in a small town with a foreclosed house, my family was finally learning to live without me. And somewhere here, under a sky full of stars, I was finally learning to live for me. I stopped at the edge of the water, letting the waves wash over my shoes. The air smelled of salt and freedom. I took a deep breath and said softly, to no one, to everyone, I'm done. And for the first time in my life, I meant it.